The puzzle completes too neatly. Moments fall into place with a grace that feels rehearsed, as if chance itself had been edited, and life were being shaped not by randomness, but by a hidden hand writing behind the curtain. You've felt it before. That phone call from a friend arriving the instant their name brushed your mind. The missed train that quietly saved you from disaster. Two strangers crossing paths across continents, only to discover their families were once bound in childhood. These are not just charming coincidences. They are fragments of a deeper pattern, stories stitched too perfectly, raising unsettling questions. Why does life so often echo the logic of fiction? Why do events resolve with such narrative precision, as though the universe itself hungers for closure? In storytelling, this is called narrative closure, the tying of loose ends, the satisfaction of resolution. But reality, we are told, is not supposed to work that way. It is supposed to be raw, chaotic, unshaped, a cascade of disorder without symmetry. And yet, across cultures, across centuries, we encounter lives and deaths that unfold like carefully written fables. Leaders assassinated on symbolic dates, uprisings igniting on the anniversaries of long-forgotten revolutions. The Titanic, sinking in a tragedy eerily mirroring a novel published 14 years before, The Wreck of the Titan. Chance, we are told. But chance rarely carries such precision. Psychologists remind us that the mind craves pattern, that we are wired to extract meaning from chaos, even if we must hallucinate it. They call it apophenia, the tendency to see connections where none exist. But how far can self-deception go, when life itself seems to rhyme with uncanny symmetry? When strangers meet with impossible timing, when deaths echo poetry, when history repeats itself with the cadence of verse. Consider Anthony Hopkins. Before filming The Girl from Petrovka, he scoured London for the rare, out-of-print book on which the film was based. He found nothing. Until one afternoon, on a bench in the underground, he stumbled upon a copy left behind, waiting for him as if planted. Later, he met the author, who revealed that very copy was his own, lost years earlier, filled with personal handwritten notes. A dropped book, a lost manuscript, a chance discovery. Yet the story unfolded exactly as it would have in a novel. These alignments disturb us more than they comfort. Because if the puzzle fits too well, then who designed the edges? Some whisper of simulations, realities governed by algorithms that prefer narrative logic to chaos. Others invoke Jung's synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that carry spiritual weight beyond cause and effect. But whichever name you give it, these are not accidents. They are structural, woven into the framework of existence itself. And there is a darker symmetry too. Tragedies that strike with theatrical timing. Villains who fall with ironic precision. Karmic justice that arrives as if scripted for an audience. In Shakespeare's age, this was called divine justice. In ours, it feels unsettling, as though our choices might not belong fully to us, as though we are improvising actors, unaware that the script was written long before we entered the stage. Now, turn inward. Examine the texture of your own life. How many choices, once arbitrary, reveal themselves in hindsight as perfect threads leading you to this exact moment. How often has the path straightened, the pieces clicked, the invisible hand revealed itself only after you'd already stepped forward? Perhaps not every detail is fixed. Perhaps the small brushstrokes are ours. But the broader arcs, the great narrative curves, are already inscribed. And when we align with them, life briefly becomes literature, every moment charged with story. But here lies the most haunting truth. We almost never see it as it happens. The pattern only reveals itself in retrospect. The heartbreak that cleared the path for the love that defined you. The rejection that forced open a door you would never have dared to touch. The delay that concealed a miracle. It is comforting, yes, but it also unsettles. Because if our lives are stories, then who is the author? What is the genre? Who is watching? And do we have a say in the final chapter? Or has it been drafted long before we arrived? As you sit with this, reflect on your own hidden closures. The times life felt written, not lived. Ask yourself, were you fortunate or were you guided? And if guided, by whom? Because when the puzzle completes too neatly, it is not just coincidence. It is a whisper, a clue, a flicker of something watching, waiting, turning the pages. It is the reminder that your life may not only be yours to live, but also a story being told through you. And perhaps that realization, quiet, unnerving, inevitable, is where the true narrative begins. The silence knows too much. When no one is near, when the world seems to pause, most dismiss it as nothing more than quiet. An ordinary lull, a breath between sounds. But listen carefully. The hush that arrives when you are truly alone is not absence at all. It is presence. Something deeper, something calculated, as though reality exhales, removes its mask, and for a fleeting instant ceases its performance. Think of that eerie stillness when you walk alone down a familiar hallway. The refrigerator hum softens. The traffic outside seems to dissolve. Even your footsteps sound faint, as though absorbed into a vacuum. It does not feel like peace. It feels like suspension. Like the world has entered standby mode, waiting, watching, or worse, temporarily shut down. Now ask yourself, if sound is only necessary when there are ears to hear it, why render it at all when you are alone? This question drags us toward the unsettling corridors of simulation theory. What if we inhabit a vast and intricate program, so advanced that it adapts its rendering in real time, showing us only what is necessary for the illusion to hold? In such a system, ambient noise could be paused, scaled down, or erased entirely until an observer calls it forth. Sound, in this frame, is not an unbroken constant. It is streamed, summoned only for those who are present to perceive it. This isn't merely speculation. Game developers already do this. In sprawling digital landscapes, only the regions near the player are fully rendered. The rest, entire mountains, forests, and distant cities, exist merely as dormant code, sleeping until approached. Even ambient sounds in these worlds play only when relevant to the player's position. So consider, what if reality itself operates by the same logic? Think of those moments when you suddenly notice a ticking clock that has been there all along. The sound did not begin at that instant. You simply aligned with it, as though your attention summoned the noise into being. It is not the clock that changed. It is the rendering that caught up. And the silence, too, may not be passive. It may be reactive. There exists a kind of silence that presses against your ears, dense, heavy, like static withheld. Some describe walking alone in nature and sensing a strange delay in sound. Leaves rustling just a fraction too late, a branch creaking half a beat behind your movement. As though the world is buffering itself, filling in gaps the moment before you notice. This recalls the observer effect in quantum physics. Particles do not collapse into definite states until they are measured. Until then, they float in a haze of probabilities. Could this extend beyond particles to entire rooms, forests, skies? Could your environment itself finalize its output, its sounds, its textures, its temperatures, only once your attention falls upon them? Think back to childhood. Remember how rooms felt different the moment adults left? Spaces seemed to deflate, to lose weight, to flatten. Perhaps it was not imagination. Researchers note that the human brain is attuned to hidden frequencies, to the subtle hum of social presence. When that vanishes, the mind strains for input, tuning into the silence, entering a state of hyper-observation. And what it perceives there, stretching seconds, muffled echoes, slow clocks, may not be hallucination at all. It may be your first glimpse beneath the rendering. Another clue. You've likely sensed when a television is on in a room, even if muted, even if turned away. That faint frequency cuts through the quiet. But when every machine is off, when every current dies down, the silence feels different. Thinner, hollow, unrendered. And this emptiness unsettles us, not because it is quiet, but because it feels like something is missing, like a vital background process has been suspended. That feeling awakens something primal, a sense not of being abandoned by people, but abandoned by the system itself. Even astronauts speak of it. After returning from orbit, many describe an unnatural silence in space. Beyond Earth's atmosphere, there is no air to carry sound, and yet even the noises of machinery felt thin, artificial, out of sync. Some reported that mechanical hums seemed to arise only when required, as if the environment itself generated sound reactively. One astronaut confessed it felt as if the silence were alive, listening back. So what do we make of this? That silence may not be a void, but a function, a pause, a placeholder. Perhaps when you are truly alone and the world falls deathly quiet, you are brushing the edges of the rendered map. Perhaps the birds you do not hear were never coded in until you stepped outside. Perhaps your echo is late, not because the hallway changed, but because it was only just activated to accommodate your presence. It leaves us with a chilling thought, that reality is no more stable than a stage play. The set exists only while the audience watches. The moment you leave, the lights dim, the backdrop dissolves, and silence swallows the stage. Not because the world is resting, but because it was never fully there. So the next time you find yourself in true solitude, resist the urge to fill it. Do not drown it in music or in glowing screens or in voices borrowed from elsewhere. Pause. Listen. Notice not only what is there, But what isn't? The creak that comes too late, the wind that never stirs, the stillness that waits for your breath. Because in that moment, you are not simply surrounded by silence. You are staring directly into the pause between worlds, and the silence, dense, knowing, patient, already knows that you are listening. In that suspended realm, where logic drifts like smoke but never lands, you walk through places that are not real yet carry the texture of memory. A hallway from childhood. A field that never existed until the dream itself conjured it. And then, you stop. Because something is there. Not a body, not a face, only eyes. Floating, unblinking, tracking your every move. This is no isolated event. Across thousands of lucid dream accounts, cataloged in research labs, recorded in journals, whispered in forums at 3 a.m., the same detail repeats. Not monsters, not shadows, eyes, sometimes pairs, sometimes clusters, not attached to faces, but suspended in the dream air, watching, studying, cold, aware, as if the dream itself were not entirely yours to inhabit. A woman in Sao Paulo once described walking through her dream apartment, only to discover golden eyes embedded in the wallpaper. She blinked, and they vanished. Yet she could still feel them, lurking behind the illusion, like a hidden surveillance system masked as metaphor. A programmer in Berlin, fully lucid, attempted to bend his dream. Walls stretched, time warped, gravity dissolved at his command. But each violation, each bending of the rules, was met with the same response. Eyes, appearing in the sky above him, as though the system itself was monitoring the breach. Not as symbols, as warnings. What are these watchers? Some psychologists call them fragments of the self, the subconscious watching itself. Lucid dreaming, after all, is a rare state. The conscious mind rising within the subconscious. You become actor and observer, both the dreamer and the one observing the dream. In this light, the eyes could be nothing more than your own inner surveillance. The ego, the superego, the fragments of self monitoring the trespass. A mirror of your own fear of seeing too much, of breaking rules in a space never meant to be fully yours. But for many, this explanation collapses. Because the eyes do not always feel internal. They feel weighted, external, intentionally present. One dreamer wrote, "It wasn't like I was watching myself. It was like something was watching through me, using my dream as a window." So ask yourself, what if dreams are not private? The subconscious is a vast archive, overflowing with memories, desires, and truths that waking life suppresses. In sleep, our defenses vanish. What if in that openness, something else can enter? What if eyes in dreams are not symbols, but interfaces? What if they are not yours, but theirs? Science already hints at the uncanny. Neurologists can stimulate regions of the brain to create the sensation of being watched, to conjure shadow figures or faces in the periphery. But dreamers often report more. eyes that shift as they move, eyes that appear only when lucidity begins, as though awareness itself triggers detection. It leads to an unnerving thought. Does waking inside a dream alert something? Something that prefers you stay asleep? Across history, the eye has symbolized divine surveillance. The eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye, the third eye of awakening. But these dream eyes do not bless. They assess. Not gods, not guardians, auditors. Some lucid dreamers attempt confrontation. They stare back. Sometimes the eyes blink, dissolving into nothing. Other times, the dreamer is yanked into darkness, the dream collapsing. One man in Tokyo swore that after locking gazes with dream eyes, he woke with nosebleeds and a static buzzing in his skull that lasted for hours. He never dared again. Why would anything watch us in dreams? Because dreams hold raw truth, unfiltered, unperformed, a compressed file of everything we are. In a world obsessed with data, what better archive than the dreaming mind? Imagine a system, biological or digital, that could mine that archive, to learn you, to sell to you, to bend or control you, all without permission. If dreams are private sanctuaries, then eyes in dreams are violations. They break the contract. And what unsettles most is that the eyes do not hide. They want to be seen. They want you to know that you are not alone. Some theorists tie this directly to simulation theory. If reality is constructed, then dreams may be the back-end code, testing grounds, sandboxes, and the eyes, debugging tools. System administrators watching for anomalies, watching for you. Others see it differently. Not mechanical, not programmed, but spiritual. Fragments of consciousness from somewhere else. Not malicious, simply curious. Drifting through thought like travelers without bodies. Attaching to lucid dreamers like barnacles on a ship. Studying this dimension from within our own minds, code, spirit, or shadow. One truth remains. The eyes appear when you try to wake up, when you resist, when you seek control. And that alone should unsettle you, because if opening your eyes inside a dream alerts them, what happens when you open your eyes inside your life? What happens when awareness itself becomes the violation? Every act of noticing may be another flare in the dark, another signal to the watchers beyond the veil. So tonight, when your dream begins to bend and eyes emerge from nowhere, do not look away, but do not stare too long. Some mirrors do not forgive the gaze, and some eyes, ancient, patient, are still watching, waiting for you to notice that you've already been seen. Alone. And then, there it is again. That cough. Not similar, not close, but identical. The exact same cough you heard earlier today. And then a car engine passes. Its sputter and rev a perfect replica of one you heard 3 days ago on another street at another time. This is not déjà vu. It runs deeper, stranger. You begin to wonder, is the world recycling itself? Running low on background audio, looping the same effects on repeat, expecting you not to notice? At first, it feels trivial, but the pattern in the coincidence grows louder. the way your phone vibrates, always at oddly specific intervals, always when your thoughts sharpen on something private. The way the same dog barks with machine-like timing every single morning, its sound not alive, but programmed. These are not random disruptions. They are interruptions with precision, a code hidden inside repetition. It begins to feel as though the world is stitched from a limited library of sound files, and only now are you beginning to hear the reuse. Some call it the sound library glitch. The theory is simple. What we take as random environmental noise is not random at all. It is procedural, triggered, generated by an algorithm woven into the fabric of existence. If this is a simulation, it would make sense. Why design infinite sounds when finite loops suffice? Like footsteps in a video game, sampled, recycled, replayed endlessly whenever you are not supposed to be listening. But you are listening. And that is the problem. This isn't paranoia. It is pattern recognition. The human brain was built to notice recurrence, to catch the predator's footfall, the rhythm of seasons, the signs of oncoming storms. But in an artificial environment, this instinct turns against the design. It reveals seams the architects never expected you to see, like the same ringtone ringing in elevators across a city, the same man's cough echoing behind you in 3 different grocery stores, the same squeak of a door in buildings that share no blueprints. This is no longer similarity. This is identity. Exact matches, perfect copies. Sounds duplicated down to the waveform, as if you were living inside a compressed audio file, where the loops recycle, believing you won't notice. Think of the Wilhelm scream, a sound effect used in hundreds of films, from Star Wars to Indiana Jones. Overused until it became iconic. But now extend that into reality. What if the world itself does the same? Drawing from a small archive of default noises, a cough, a laugh, a ringing phone. How many times have you heard the same sneeze, not similar in tone, but exactly duplicated? How many car alarms wail in perfect imitation, regardless of make or year? Lazy universe or efficient universe? The answer changes everything. Extend it further. Cognitive psychologists note that memory anchors itself to repetition. When a sound reappears, especially one that feels neutral or irritating, the brain burns it deeper into its groove. Once you notice one recurrence, you begin to catch all the others. And suddenly the background becomes louder than the foreground. And here is where unease begins. What if the repetition is not just a glitch, but a system of monitoring? If you wished to study a subject, you would test them. Introduce recurring signals at calculated intervals. Observe how often they notice. Measure their awareness. In military surveillance, audio cues are used to test alertness. So what if reality itself is running those tests on us? Dismiss it, and you can call it imagination. Yes, cities are noisy. Yes, cars share engines. Yes, phones recycle tones. But does that explain the identical frequencies, the precise cadence, the intervals that feel too exact? Think of it differently. If someone wore the same mask in 3 separate crowds, eventually you would notice. The disguise would fail, and that is what is happening now. But the mask here is auditory. a camouflage of sound unraveling when you dare to listen. There is another layer: synchronicity. Carl Jung called it meaningful coincidence without cause. What if repeated sounds are not merely mechanical echoes, but signals? Not language in words, but language in rhythm. Patterns, loops. Your brain is a receiver. It can tune, and perhaps the universe, or whatever stands behind it, is speaking in the only way it can: through repetition, through reuse. The message may not be meant to be decoded. The point may simply be to recognize its existence, and once you do, you begin to notice everything else. Streetlights blinking off as you pass beneath, strangers repeating the same conversations, weather flickering strangely, like a system that briefly forgot which season to render. These are not mistakes. They are compression artifacts, evidence of a world built to conserve, to optimize, to loop. Even in dreams it happens. Lucid dreamers often report the same sounds recurring: a cough, a knock, a hum. Sounds they cannot place yet know they have heard before. Is the subconscious drawing from the same library of loops? Does dream and waking life pull from a shared archive, processed by the same machine? So next time it happens, that cough, that perfectly identical cough, pause. Don't dismiss it. Ask yourself, where did I hear this before? What was I thinking in that moment? And who, if anyone, was listening? Because once you truly begin to listen, you realize the world is not random. It is scripted. It is looped. It is optimized. And now, you've heard the seam. The mechanical coincidences that recur so often are not accidents. They are signals. They are the system whispering, "You are getting too close." And once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Synchronicities stack endlessly. Once your eyes open to the patterns, they refuse to close again. A license plate flashes the same number that surfaced in your dream. A stranger hums the very song that drifted through your thoughts minutes before. You glance at the clock. 11:11 again. You dismiss it once, twice, maybe 3 times. But then the alignments keep arriving. They pile on top of each other, like reality leaning closer, whispering, "Pay attention." This is the territory of synchronicity. When coincidences lose their innocence, when they stop feeling random and begin to feel intentional. At first, they come as sparks, small flickers of uncanny timing. You think of someone, and the phone rings. You mention an idea, and the next day it appears in a passing conversation, or in the targeted glow of an advertisement. Skeptics say it is nothing but pattern recognition gone feral. But deep down, something within insists it is more than that. And the deeper you lean in, the more it multiplies. Synchronicities do not plateau, they escalate. The more you watch, the more they unfold. Reality, once noticed, becomes responsive, like a simulation engine waiting for interaction before it renders the next scene. Carl Jung coined the term not as superstition, but as recognition of meaning. He believed the psyche and the outer world were not divided, but entwined. A dream of a black cat inside your mind, followed by one crossing your path at dawn. A friend's words mirroring your private thoughts with unnerving precision. For Jung, these were not accidents, but intersections. Moments when the inner and the outer touched like mirrors, reflecting back to each other without end. And once it begins, the stacking intensifies. Thoughts feel choreographed. A phrase blooms in your imagination, and seconds later, you hear it spoken on a podcast. You picture a red balloon, and one drifts past your window. It is as though the universe itself is winking, asking how far your awareness can stretch. Even stranger, when you speak it aloud, when you share the pattern with others, they begin to notice too. As if your acknowledgement activates their perception, as though synchronicity spreads like a contagion of awareness. Neurologically, there is an explanation. The reticular activating system, the brain's filter, sharpens attention to what you focus on. Buy a car, and suddenly you see that model everywhere. But synchronicity is not just repetition. It is timing, the precision of the moment. Not that you see the number 42 everywhere, but that you see it when standing at a crossroads in life. The object matters less than the arrival. It is the when that haunts you. And so it builds. People appear at exactly the stage you need them. The mentor who steps in when you are ready to quit. The heartbreak that arrives the same day a job opens in another country. The narrative threads interlace too smoothly, not chaotic, but designed. Your life begins to resemble literature, a story with callbacks and foreshadowing, with arcs and echoes. It leads to a staggering question: is reality intelligent? Some suggest the universe is not passive, but interactive. Quantum physics shows us particles that behave differently when observed. What if the same principle operates at scale? What if attention itself is the trigger? And synchronicities are the universe's way of replying. A nod, a breadcrumb, a trail left for you to follow. This does not mean every detail is fate. It suggests something subtler, that your mind and the world are in dialogue. That choice and chance, signal and noise, may not be separate, but two halves of one conversation. For many who dive deep, the experience is a second awakening. The first was from ignorance into awareness. The second, from randomness into meaning. Some speak of synchronicity storms, days when everything aligns so perfectly that disbelief collapses. Clocks, songs, faces, symbols, layer upon layer, until the sheer weight of it changes how you move through the world. You no longer see events. You see messages. The air itself begins to shimmer with intent. But this awareness carries responsibility, because the mirror cuts both ways. If the world is reflecting you, then your chaos echoes outward, and your peace, once found within, may ripple through the fabric around you. Across cultures, the pattern holds. Ancient oracles spoke in riddles that bent to the shape of coming events. Tribal communities read signs in dreams and stars. Even today, lives are rerouted by so-called coincidences. A job left behind, a city moved to, a proposal made to a stranger. All because something clicked. So ask yourself, are we scripting reality together, co-creating meaning in a feedback loop between mind and matter? Not all believe. Some dismiss it. Some fear it. Yet for others, it is undeniable proof that life is not random, but responsive. And if you are noticing, if you are one of those people who catches the alignments, who feels the echoes, understand this: you are not alone. Even this very moment, you're watching, your listening may be part of it. A breadcrumb placed where you needed it most. Because once the loop begins, it rarely ends. The patterns multiply, the game deepens, and the question that remains is no longer if it is real, but what it is trying to show you next. So, have you felt it? The stacking of synchronicities, not once, but endlessly? Do they haunt you as reminders or guide you as invitations? And if you dared to answer, would you admit that part of you already knows? Delays. Sometimes you feel something before you know why. A shiver down your spine. A sudden weight in your chest. A flicker of guilt, a rush of dread, a tension you can't yet name. Only seconds later does the thought arrive. The memory, the image, the face. You tell yourself the thought caused the feeling. But what if it didn't? What if the feeling arrived first, and the thought was nothing more than the story your mind scrambled together to explain what your body already knew? This is not imagination. It is measurable. A glitch, but also a design. Psychologists call it affective primacy. Your emotional brain fires faster than your rational one. The body reacts in milliseconds. Only later does the mind catch up. Imagine walking down a quiet street at night. You feel a chill, not from the air, but from something beneath it. You glance around, and only then notice the flicker of a shadow, the odd silence, the way the light feels wrong. Your body had already decided, unsafe. Your conscious mind only followed. This is no defect. It is survival's fingerprint, etched into us by millions of years. Our ancestors did not wait for reason before they ran from rustling grass. The wind might have been harmless, or it might have been teeth, death moving low through the reeds. There wasn't time to debate. The amygdala, our primal alarm, acted first, and thought was left to explain afterward. The truth is, it still works that way. The emotional brain is ancient, wired for speed. It reacts to tone, posture, a micro-expression, a smell so faint you never register it consciously. It draws from old memory, trauma stored deep in tissue. By the time your reasoning brain arrives, the verdict has already been delivered. Sometimes it even reacts to thoughts you haven't had yet. You feel dread at the sound of a text arriving. Your stomach drops before you even check the name. Then you see it. The one person you didn't want to hear from. How did your body know first? Because memory is layered. Facts live in one archive, but feelings live deeper. The hippocampus logs details. The amygdala keeps emotion. So your body can respond to the faintest cues, a vibration pattern, a silence before a sound, the pitch of a ringtone, long before your mind knows why. It is why you cry at scenes you cannot relate to, why you tense in rooms that look harmless but smell like hospitals, why joy arrives before explanation. It is the lag. Feeling first, thought later. And it unsettles us. Because we like to believe we are rational, that emotions follow thoughts like shadows. But reality whispers otherwise. We feel, and only then do we invent the story. This lag explains misunderstandings. It explains the argument that flares before you know what triggered it. It explains the rage you feel before the words that provoked it even land. It explains love at first sight, when the body leans forward before the mind has reason. Think of the times you spoke cruelly, only later realizing the full weight of your anger. That was the lag. Or when you made a decision and hours later unease crept in, as though your subconscious had already rejected the choice while your conscious self lagged behind. That too was the lag. And here lies the danger. The mind cannot tolerate the gap. It hates being behind the body. So it fills in blanks. It invents reasons, sometimes true, sometimes false. You may tell yourself you're angry because of your partner's words, when in truth, the anger began hours earlier, triggered by something forgotten. You may decide you're anxious about work, when the anxiety belongs to an older grief. Your brain patches the delay with convenient stories. We live in this backfill every day, explanations layered over emotions that never needed them. But what if, instead of rushing to explain, we paused? What if we treated the lag as a message? Because emotions are not noise, they are data. They are fast, unfiltered intelligence, arriving ahead of reason. In ancient traditions, this was not seen as weakness. In Hinduism, emotions were echoes of the soul's memory. In Chinese medicine, unprocessed feelings were mapped to organs, grief in the lungs, anger in the liver. Indigenous cultures taught that sudden emotions were signals from ancestors or whispers from the land itself. Modern science uses colder words, but slowly circles back to the same truth. Our emotions are not secondary to thought. Often, they are the first intelligence. The delay is not failure. It is simply the toll of having two minds, the fast one that feels and the slow one that speaks. So the next time a feeling floods you, without reason, without warning, do not dismiss it. Do not scold it as irrational. Do not rush to patch it with explanation. Instead, ask, what does my body know that my mind has not caught up to yet? That single question can turn fear into insight, conflict into clarity, reaction into reflection. Because once you understand the lag, you no longer fight it. You listen. You lean in. And in that listening, you reclaim a power. Not the power to erase your emotions, but the power to trust them. To see them not as glitches, but as early signals of truth, arriving just ahead of you, waiting for you to follow. Space feels copy-pasted. They told us it was infinite, but they didn't tell us that infinity would look so familiar. At first glance, the cosmos overwhelms. A dizzying sea of galaxies, stars flung like sparks across a velvet void, nebulae blooming like luminous storms in the black. But when you linger, when you truly look, when you zoom in, trace the spirals, measure the distances, an unsettling realization forms. It all starts to look the same. Galaxies spin like pinwheels, repeating endlessly. Star clusters gather in predictable shapes. Even the vast cosmic web, that lattice of filaments stretching across billions of light years, mimics something eerily close to home, the neurons of a human brain. Everywhere you look, you don't just see variety. You see repetition, iteration, copy-paste. And this isn't just poetic musing, it's statistical fact. Astronomers have long observed that galaxies follow a narrow set of designs: elliptical, spiral, lenticular. The universe, so unimaginably vast, seems curiously unwilling to invent beyond a handful of templates. Zoom further out, and those galaxies cluster, superclusters linking into threads, threads weaving into a mesh. But this mesh is not chaos. It is ordered. It obeys rules, procedural rules. Much like a video game building endless terrain from a finite instruction set, the universe seems to grow not through randomness, but through recursion. Galaxies born from a handful of equations. Gravity, time, simplicity spinning itself into grandeur. This is the same principle used in artificial simulations, procedural generation. Instead of handcrafting each detail, a few algorithms are allowed to blossom into convincing complexity. A mountain range, a forest, a galaxy, all summoned by repeating logic at different scales. So ask yourself, if our cosmos looks procedurally generated, are we exploring reality, or simply uncovering code rendered again and again through higher dimensions? Think of fractals, endlessly intricate, but born from the repetition of a simple rule. Zoom in forever, and you never escape the pattern. The Mandelbrot set is infinite, but also predictable. Nothing new, just the same formula echoing itself at every level. Now see the cosmos through that lens. Atoms echo galaxies. Superclusters echo neurons. Physics repeats identically across impossible distances. Time and again, the universe chooses to echo itself, which raises the question, is the universe not only patterned, but itself a pattern? If a programmer were tasked with creating a world this vast, efficiency would demand repetition. No infinite library of objects, only templates, only rules. Change the variables, tweak the ranges, shuffle the pieces, but never break the underlying logic. Galaxies spiral differently, stars burn at varied temperatures, but beneath the surface, the code is the same. A Lego set reshuffled, not randomness, recursion. We think space is infinite possibility, but the deeper we look, the more it feels like déjà vu. That eerie sensation that you've stood beneath these stars before, even though you never have. Perhaps that feeling is not wonder, but recognition. Some say this is why Hubble's images unsettle as much as they awe. It isn't only the scale, it's the uniformity, the symmetry, the whispering suggestion. This is rendered. Procedural generation leaves fingerprints, the logarithmic spirals of galaxies, the graceful arcs that recur with uncanny precision. These are not the jagged signatures of chaos. They are brushstrokes of logic. And logic can be reverse engineered. So what if when we peer into space, we are not looking outward at reality, but inward at its code? What if every galaxy is not proof of infinite variety, but evidence of a developer's shortcut? A cosmic texture file, reused again and again on the grandest scale. When explorers once gazed at the sea, they believed the horizon was the edge of the world. Perhaps we now face another horizon, not of water and sky, but of photons, gravity, and repeating geometry. Another illusion, disguised as infinity. So the next time you stare into the stars and feel the chill of recognition, maybe you have seen them before. Maybe they are what the system needed to render, to convince you of endlessness, a fractal sky, a procedural galaxy, a copy-paste cosmos. And if that is true, then beyond the repetition, beyond the tiling and the templates, there must be a source, a hidden origin still running, still generating, still watching, and no one looks behind. No one looks behind. You walk down a street, in a dream, or perhaps in waking life. The sidewalk stretches ahead of you. Cars line their perfect places. Strangers pass with believable faces. Everything makes sense. But stop. Turn. Can you truly recall what was there 5 seconds ago? Was the trash can dented? Were the bricks uneven? Were there bricks at all? Chances are you cannot answer, because most of us do not look behind, not in dreams, not in life. We keep our gaze fixed forward, on what matters, on what we intend to see. And from that small habit emerges one of the most unsettling theories ever whispered about existence: that reality itself might not fully exist until we demand it. That the world, like a game engine, renders only what is in view. This is not just philosophy. It is rooted in documented psychology. Change blindness, inattentional blindness, cognitive load. In experiments, subjects fail to notice massive changes: a curtain shifting color, an object disappearing, even a person being swapped for another, because their focus was elsewhere. The mind fills in the missing pieces not with truth, but with assumption. So what if your brain is not simply ignoring the details? What if the details were never there? What if the bricks behind you, the tree over your shoulder, the faces you never turned to see simply do not exist until you force them into being? Video games solved this long ago. Frustum culling, occlusion rendering. Only what the player faces is built. Everything else waits, suspended, to save power and memory. Why waste resources on what no one sees? Now ask yourself, why would the universe be different? Lucid dreamers have stumbled into this. Doors that refuse to open until imagined. Rooms that stay blank until stared at. Some even report that turning too quickly causes the dream to flicker, morph, or crash, as though they turned faster than the system could keep pace. And what of waking life? We trust the world is stable. We assume the ceiling stays the same color whether or not we glance upward. But this trust is faith, not evidence. We rarely check. We rarely test. And the mind, clever and lazy, fills the silence with expectation. But what if the background is hollow until you challenge it? What if reality exists only when interrogated? Quantum mechanics whispers the same. The double-slit experiment. Particles that behave like waves until observed. Observation collapses them into one definite reality. Until then, they exist only as probability, a cloud of maybes. Perhaps the universe waits for your gaze before deciding what to be. Reports from those who lived in isolation, in trauma, in obsession, describe similar things. Backgrounds warping, spaces repeating, time folding back on itself, as though their focus caught the system too slow, too old, to hide its seams. A man in Helsinki once said he walked the same route for years. One day, he turned back. The shop signs had changed. He photographed them. Days later, they reverted. He began leaving objects in strange places, checking for inconsistencies. Sometimes, when he turned too suddenly, he swore the world behind him was not there at all, only static, until the system corrected. It sounds absurd, but ask yourself, have you ever stared into a corner, felt a drag, a slight delay between intention and sight, a momentary catch, as though something was hurrying to load in place? Perhaps the world is stagecraft. The spotlight moves with your gaze. The crew behind the curtain scrambles to reset. When you do not look back, the stage rests. Undefined. Waiting. And then comes the darker implication. What if you are not meant to look behind? What if the system punishes curiosity? Dreamers speak of it, turning back only to hear whispers. Don't turn around. Eyes appearing in the sky. A self waiting behind them, smiling knowingly. Why would a dream, or a system, conjure such terrors unless turning breaks a rule? Children sometimes say their toys move when unobserved, that walls breathe when they close their eyes. We call it imagination. But maybe they have not yet learned to filter out the seams. If you are being watched, it may not be by a person. It may be the system itself, adjusting to your focus, feeding you only what you can handle. And if you push too far, too quickly, it blinks. And when it blinks, so might you. So tomorrow, when you walk a street, do not only look ahead. Stop, turn, study the corners, count the windows, photograph the signs. Try to catch the world in the act of building itself. Because if reality renders only what you see, then every moment you look away is not living in the world at all, but waiting in the pause. And something, unseen, is deciding what to load next. There, you check the table twice. You move the books. You retrace your steps. Nothing. The object is gone. But then, 20 minutes later, after you've surrendered, after you've stopped searching, it's back, sitting perfectly in place, not under anything, not hidden in shadows, not discovered in some overlooked corner, just there, calm, neat, as though it had never left at all. You stare at it in silence, that cold wash running through your chest. You know you didn't miss it. You know you didn't simply fail to see. It feels instead as if reality itself had corrected the error, quietly, efficiently, before you could press too hard. As though the system, caught in its own mistake, patched the scene before you could report the bug. This isn't forgetfulness. It happens too often. The TV remote, the ring, the exact page of the book, gone when you need it. And then, once you've stopped demanding, once your frustration has collapsed into doubt, it reappears. Perfectly aligned. Too precise to be chance. And the unsettling part isn't the object itself. It's the timing. As if the moment you start to really question the solidity of the world, it scrambles to hide the glitch, to reset the illusion, to clean itself up. Welcome to the self-correcting simulation theory. It suggests that what we call reality behaves less like substance and more like software. Just as computer programs repair rendering errors or cover visual artifacts, our world may have mechanisms that restore continuity whenever something breaks immersion. The object doesn't simply return, it is snapped back, like a magician reversing a trick the instant you leaned too close to catch the method. And here's the trap. Our minds are complicit. Memory is not just flawed, it is pliable. When something disappears, when trust in the environment breaks, we assume fault lies in us. We tell ourselves, I forgot. I wasn't paying attention. But what if your self-doubt is the very key the system needs? The moment your certainty fades, it seizes its chance, rewrites the error, drops the object neatly back into place. Reality then becomes a negotiation between your belief and its design. It only breaks when you insist it broke. Patterns whisper through this. Notice when items reappear. It is rarely random. They return when you give up, when you walk away, when your focus loosens its grip, as if something waits for the moment you've surrendered, then dares to reset the scene. Stretch this further. Think of those eerie alignments, the way you cancel plans, and then it rains. The train you miss, that later derails. The laptop that crashes, yet the unsaved file miraculously survives. It feels not like coincidence, but correction. As though the system itself rescues the narrative, restores the story, before the crack can spread too far. Some even tie this to the Mandela effect. Shared false memories. Whole groups recalling details that the official record denies. Maybe we aren't misremembering. Maybe we are remembering before the patch. Perhaps what we call confusion is residue from a larger correction, a system-wide rewrite that rippled through every mind. Ancient cultures noticed too. They spoke of trickster gods, spirits that swapped objects, poltergeists blamed for moving things. Perhaps those old stories were metaphors for the same experience. Reality tidying itself with uncanny precision. Even quantum physics murmurs the same. The act of observation collapses a particle into definite form. Before you look, it is only probability, a blur of potential. Now imagine the entire environment behaves so. When you search, when you stare, reality freezes, unsure how to convincingly lie. So it waits. And when your attention breaks, it writes the missing data back in. Unseen, the system cheats. Unseen, the trick is repaired. Dreams echo this too. Lose an object in a dream, and it may reappear without explanation. Some even report dreaming of items that later manifest in waking life. Could dreams be peeking behind the curtain? Accessing the back end, seeing the before and after of the cleanup? Perhaps what we call dreaming is nothing more than glimpsing the console, the hidden interface of reality itself. But awareness is dangerous, because the simulation only works if you trust the environment. If you believe objects obey laws, if you believe space does not lie. And once you see it happen, once you notice the patch, the illusion grows fragile. So the next time something vanishes, do not dismiss yourself. Mark the moment, speak it aloud, write it down, because the proof will never be in the object. It will always be in the timing. And if you notice enough times, if you refuse to surrender your certainty, reality may start noticing you back. And that is when it turns. Because not everything returns. Not every glitch is fixed. Sometimes the system blinks and freezes. Sometimes it sees you seeing it, and instead of repairing the scene, it leaves it broken. And in that silence, you will understand. The truth is not that reality is stable. The truth is that it is maintained. At the edges, identities merge. You're walking down a street, and a stranger passes. Something in your mind stutters. For an instant, their face is not one face, but two. The nose belongs to your teacher. The smile belongs to your cousin. Your memory flickers between them, unable to decide which truth it should hold. And then, with unsettling certainty, you realize it's both. Two faces, bled together, stitched invisibly along the seams. You haven't seen a double. You've seen a hybrid. This is the phenomenon of merging identities. When the brain perceives someone not as one individual, but as a perfect blend of two, you already know. And it is far more common and far more unsettling than most people realize. At first, you might brush it away. Coincidence, resemblance. But the more it happens, the more uncanny it feels. Because these are not people who simply look a little like someone familiar. They feel constructed, like two lives overlapped, colliding into a single figure that walks past you, unaware of the strange alchemy they've triggered in your perception. And it isn't always visual. Sometimes it arrives in sound. A new voice carries the rhythm of your father, but the phrasing of a friend you haven't seen in years. A stranger's gesture mirrors someone you've loved. Their presence becomes uncanny, like a character modeled from templates that were never meant to overlap. To a skeptic, this is just a glitch of memory. But in truth, it is rooted in the machinery of perception itself. Your brain does not store faces like photographs. It stores fragments, shapes, angles, distances, a catalog of parts. When you recognize someone, your mind runs the fragments against its archive. And when two or more people share overlapping traits, especially ones laced with emotion, your brain sometimes blends them together without asking permission. This isn't an error. It is survival. For millennia, humans needed to sort quickly. Friend or foe, kin or stranger. The brain learned to compress, to merge identities into types. But in doing so, it sometimes warps. It creates composites, ghosts. And so you may feel sudden trust for a stranger, or sudden suspicion. Not because of who they are, but because your brain recognizes fragments, borrowed from others who shaped you. You are not seeing them. You are seeing memory, dressed in a new face. But imagine noticing this often. Imagine seeing it everywhere. Soon, people stop feeling unique. They feel generated. The man in the cafe is a mix of your uncle and your first boss. The woman on the bus is half your ex and half your childhood neighbor. Identities stop being whole. They become recombinations, assembled from fragments you've already encountered. In simulation theory, this makes eerie sense. Video games reuse assets, skeletons, gestures, animations, to save memory. Why wouldn't a larger system reuse the same fragments of identity? Except this time, your mind has caught on. But even without simulation talk, the implications remain unnerving. Because if you can see others as mixtures, then others must see you the same. To them, you are not a singular self. You are a blend. Your voice recalls someone they miss. Your expression echoes someone they fear. Your laugh pulls two memories together and stitches them into you. You may feel solid, but to others, you are already fragmented, already overlapping, already blurred at the edges. Identity, then, is not a line. It is a gradient, a moving edge formed between perception and memory, between faces and feelings, between what is real and what is recalled. And it can create powerful distortions. Imagine falling in love, not with the person before you, but with the memory fragments they trigger. Two past loves merged into one template. The wholeness you feel is real, but it is borrowed. It belongs to the overlap. And yet, the emotions still matter. Because even echoes can move us. Artists sense this unconsciously. Writers build characters from familiar composites. A hero with your father's determination, your friend's wit, your brother's smile. A villain who smirks like your coach and stands like your cousin. They feel universal because they are built from blends. We recognize the fragments, not the face. So what happens when you become aware? When you begin to see the merges instead of ignoring them? Some say it feels like pulling back the curtain. Identity itself starts to look unstable, a fluid system instead of a solid one. You wonder if the people you meet are meant to resemble those from your past, if their blended traits are guides, pointing toward unfinished lessons, unresolved repetitions. Others read it spiritually. Faces become ancestral, permutations of a shared design handed down through time. You see your grandmother in a girl on the train. You glimpse your own smile in a stranger's laugh. The past is not gone. It is layered into the present, echoing through every face you encounter. This is not hallucination. It is perception unfiltered. A glimpse of the architecture your mind uses to build its world. And perhaps, a glimpse of the architecture that reality itself uses. So the next time someone feels like a blend, stop. Do not dismiss it. They may not simply be familiar. They may be assembled by memory, by emotion, by the logic of a universe that reuses its fragments at the seams. At the edges where identity blurs, meaning begins to leak through. Have you ever seen a stranger and whispered inside yourself, "I know them," but could not say why? Maybe the truth isn't who they are. Maybe it's who they are made of. Have you ever stepped into a room and felt the air change? A hush, sudden and absolute. Voices collapse mid-sentence. An argument dissolves without conclusion. Even an object in motion, a glass tipping, a pen falling, seems to hang just a fraction too long before obeying gravity. It feels like time hiccups, like the scene was running but froze the moment you arrived, as though reality itself was forced to change reels, switch scripts, adjust to your presence. We laugh it off, call it bad timing, awkward silence, mere coincidence. But what if it isn't? What if the moment you observe, the world recalculates? What if the play halts until it can decide what version of itself it dares to show you? This isn't just metaphor. Almost everyone has felt it. Walking into conversations that end the instant you appear. Accidents unfolding only when your gaze shifts away. A street falling silent the moment you step onto the curb. dogs freezing mid-growl the instant your eyes catch theirs. The sensation is uncanny, familiar, like glimpsing the code of something designed to operate unnoticed. Psychology calls this the observer effect. Our presence alters what is being observed. But physics takes it further. The double-slit experiment. Light behaving as a wave until observed, then collapsing into a particle. As if the universe itself withholds decisions until we watch. Now imagine that applied not to particles, but to lives. You enter a room mid-conflict. Suddenly, laughter fades. Eyes drift away. The tension bleeds into silence. Was it just awkward timing? Or did your awareness demand a rewrite? Some spiritual traditions call this energetic recalibration. When a new presence enters, the entire script must adjust. Lines reshuffled, postures rewritten, sometimes too quickly to remain convincing. You've felt this. People shifting the moment you arrive, not simply reacting to you, but bending around you, as though the event itself paused, waiting for you to take your seat before continuing. A theater full of actors frozen because the wrong audience stepped through the door. Children notice it most clearly. They enter a room and parents' arguments die mid-word. Mysterious sounds cease the instant they investigate. Even dreams collapse the moment they realize they are dreams. Innocence short-circuits the script. Reality cannot bear such unfiltered observation. Animals too respond this way. Watch them closely, and they become statues. Look away, and the ritual resumes. Your gaze becomes a pin. Attention locks the world into place. What is unwatched is free to move without consequence. Perhaps this is just psychology. Perhaps. But the weight of the feeling is harder to dismiss. The sensation that you do not merely exist inside reality, but that your presence shapes the rhythm of its unfolding. That you are not late to the scene, but the reason the scene began. And if that's true, the implications unravel everything. Reality may not be continuous, but conditional. Not a steady stream, but a branching script, constantly rewriting itself around witnesses. The world loads only what you see, the way a video game renders just enough to fill your screen. Think back. How many secrets emerged only after you turned away? How many arguments ignited the moment you left? How many outcomes seemed to wait until you stopped watching? Could it be that awareness halts certain events, that your presence prevents their unfolding? Soldiers speak of battles suspended when command arrives. Chaos holding its breath, as if trauma itself resists being witnessed. Emergency workers describe time slowing, freezing, the moment they step into disaster. Not metaphor, but literal delay, as if the moment recalculates because a new consciousness has joined the scene. This is not superstition. This is choreography, a silent contract between perception and event. Each moment exists differently because you are there. So next time you walk into a room and everything falls still, don't dismiss it. Ask yourself, what was the world doing before I arrived? And what did it need to hide the moment I stepped in? Because maybe you weren't the interruption. Maybe you were the variable. Maybe the scene didn't even begin until you appeared. And if that's true, then reality does not simply unfold. It waits for you. It pauses for you. It moves only when you look away, which leaves the final question lingering. If the world halts when you watch, what else, right now, in this very moment, is still waiting for your eyes to leave? What happens when you turn your gaze away? What parts of your life are unfolding just off stage, waiting for the cue of your attention? What truths are delayed not because they aren't real, but because you haven't looked directly at them yet? Somewhere, just out of view, the next moment is holding its breath. It waits for you to notice, and sometimes when you do, it doesn't appear in sequence. It arrives broken, scrambled, memories re-downloading out of order. You step into a room you've never been in before, yet your hand finds the light switch without searching. A song you've never heard shreds you open, unlocking an emotion so specific it makes you weep. A scent floods your chest, a flower found only in a land you've never touched. These aren't mere coincidences. They're fragments, memory packets, downloaded from a source your waking mind cannot explain. We like to believe memory is tidy, linear, a bookshelf stacked neatly by time. But it isn't. It's a network, and networks reroute. Science has already exposed memory's fragility. False memories are easy to implant. Two witnesses walk away from the same event and carry two different histories. But this isn't only about distortion, it's about misplacement. Have you ever remembered something so vividly that you could describe it in detail? The room, the voices, the light, and yet everyone insists it never happened? That the people weren't there? That the event never took place? Still, your mind swears it's true. That isn't always error. It might be a misplaced download. Some theorists say consciousness isn't locked in the skull. It's a field, a cloud, a server. Your memories aren't etched in you. They're streamed. You don't own them. You access them. But when timelines shift, when decisions ripple backward, the signal cross-connects. You begin receiving packets from adjacent lives, parallel versions, other users of the same universal server. That's why you might recall standing on a mountain you've never climbed, speaking in a language you never learned, or holding a childhood moment that doesn't match your past, but belongs to a you just adjacent, just out of reach. Dreams may be nothing more than the live download process. Your brain struggling to reconcile the fragments, sorting what belongs to you from what belongs to the version of you you almost were. And sometimes, the system gets it wrong. Think of the Mandela effect. Crowds of people remembering a logo, a phrase, a death, that in this world never happened. Are these really mistakes? Or are they collective cross-downloads? Packets leaking from one stream of memory into another. The brain isn't a vault. It's a receiver. When timelines collide, when choices fracture, it doesn't erase. It re-downloads, but not in order. Sometimes you get tomorrow before yesterday. Sometimes you inherit someone else's heartbreak. Sometimes the download isn't memory at all. It's a warning. Have you ever had a memory that hadn't happened yet? A death, a conversation, a face at the door. You remembered it, and then days or years later, it unfolded exactly. Some call it déjà vu. Others call it prophecy. But what if it's just mechanics? What if you accessed a future memory because it already exists, already cached, already written? If time isn't linear, if it's just how our consciousness renders the simulation, then memory is not past dependent. It's presence dependent. You sync to the version of you most aligned with now, and you get its data, past, future, or borrowed. This breaks identity open, because if memory can be streamed, swapped, shared, then who are you? When you recall something that never happened to you, are you host or just user? Maybe the memory was yours. Maybe it still is. Maybe it will be. So the next time a flicker of life rushes through you, a life you never lived, don't dismiss it. You may have just synced to another version of yourself. A parallel download, a script that leaked, because memory isn't always yours, and the download doesn't always arrive in order. And that, perhaps, is why some moments feel stronger than reality, because they weren't just lived, they were remembered first. The furniture hasn't moved, the lights are the same, and yet, something in the room feels heavier. Shadows stretch too long, colors sag, drained, as if the walls themselves are leaning in. It's subtle, not a horror film, not dramatic, but undeniable. The room is echoing your sadness, reflecting it, amplifying it. We're taught to explain this away. It's perception, we say. Emotion colors the world. Sadness makes things gray because the brain tunes out joy. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the world doesn't just look different? What if it becomes different? What if your emotion doesn't only filter reality, it rewrites it? There is a theory, quiet, fringe, whispered in corners of consciousness research, that reality is not just perceived, it is co-rendered with your emotional state. The simulation, the biological dream we call the world, doesn't merely adapt to your actions. It shifts its textures, its light, its weight, based on the code of your mood. Neuroscience already shows pieces of this. Sadness rewires perception itself. Depression dulls brightness, alters contrast, filters saturation. But here's the strange part. Even when researchers enhance the images artificially, make them brighter, sharper, richer, some report the same dullness, as if something deeper than the eye is intercepting the signal, as if perception isn't just passive reception, but active request. Have you noticed it? The room you once loved feels hostile after grief. The chair looks sharper, the echo harsher. The sunlight doesn't warm. It sterilizes. Even your phone screen looks dimmer, though the brightness hasn't changed. Now inverted. Joy floods in. Love, inspiration, peace. And suddenly, the world glows. Colors bloom. Textures vibrate. Even the corner you once dreaded feels like part of a painting. Same room, same light, but alive. Is the brain only rewriting input? Or is it sending a request? Is your mood a code that the system renders into the world around you? Lucid dreamers know this well. Shift your emotion, and the dream shifts. Fear darkens the sky. Calm makes flowers erupt. Not thoughts, not commands. Feelings rewrite the landscape. And if waking reality shares even a fragment of that mechanism, then your sadness isn't just interpreted. It's mirrored, enforced, looped, not for comfort, for consistency. A system that keeps you aligned by reflecting you back at yourself. Sadness confirmed by dim rooms. Powerlessness confirmed by sharper edges. The world becomes not just space, but interface. In sensory deprivation, people report the same thing. With no external input, the void bends to emotion. Colors spark. Shadows shift. The air thickens or thins, not randomly, but in sync with feeling. Is this imagination? Or is the void listening? You felt it after heartbreak. Music sounds heavier. Paintings look empty. Mirrors turn cruel. And when your mood lifts, the world forgives itself. Beauty returns. Warmth resumes. Like a stage play taking new direction from the lead actor's mood. But what if you refuse the script? What if you force a rewrite? Meditation, laughter, visualization, tiny hacks to bend the filter. They work briefly, but the system often snaps back, as if it prefers coherence, as if your mood isn't just a state, but an instruction set, which leaves a question. When the room dims, is it your sadness coloring perception, or the system ensuring sadness holds by adjusting the world to echo it back? If so, who controls the code? You, or the architecture behind the render curtain? A mirror that doesn't just reflect, but reinforces. A loop designed not to show you truth, but to trap you in it. So next time the room feels heavy, ask yourself, are you inside the space, or has the space already slipped inside you? You flip a coin. Heads. Again. Heads. Again. Heads. The numbers say this shouldn't happen. Statistics insists the chaos should spread itself out. But instead, improbabilities repeat. Not scattered, not wild. Curated. Selected. Not by chance, but by narrative. You tell yourself it's variance, randomness on a bad day. But deep down, you feel the tug. It doesn't feel like math. It feels scripted, not random, but unlikely on purpose. And that's when reality begins to twitch. Dream of someone you haven't thought of in years, and meet them the next morning. The same number follows you, on clocks, receipts, doorways. You sit in the same seat, in 3 different restaurants, on 3 unrelated days. Each event small enough to dismiss. Together, a pattern, a fingerprint, a preference embedded in the code. Statistics allows rare things to happen, but not like this. Not clustered, not dripping with meaning, not only when you notice. This suggests something darker. Probability in our world doesn't collapse by chance. It collapses by significance. Physics already gives us the frame. Particles hover in multiple states until observed. Observation collapses the wave into a single reality. Science says the choice is random. But what if it isn't? What if consciousness nudges the collapse? Not with will, but with narrative weight. This is the meaning bias hypothesis. That the universe selects outcomes not because they are probable, but because they are resonant, symbolic. charged. Think of it as an invisible editor. Noise trimmed out, coincidences stitched in, moments that push the plot forward. You don't remember the uneventful Tuesday. You remember the stranger calling your name in a city you'd never been. The book that fell open to the one sentence that echoed your fear. The path that bent around you as if waiting for your feet. Not randomness, not miracle. Meaning selected over math. Even science has cracks here. Take the hot hand fallacy in basketball. Players catching streaks. Probability says they shouldn't exist. But the streaks are real. Momentum isn't just perception. Something bends the odds once belief enters the room. Simulation theory nods knowingly. Processing power is precious. Why waste it on static, on uneventful chance? Efficient systems would optimize. They would collapse probability toward the outcomes that matter, the ones that carry story. History, too, whispers this truth. One wrong turn, and the Archduke's driver delivers him straight into an assassin's path. A single improbable detour, and the 20th century is rewritten in blood. Random accident or chosen collapse? The dangerous thought is this: probability is not a rule, but a veil, an elegant disguise for a system that chooses. You felt it. The coincidences that stack, the streaks too sharp to dismiss, the moments that feel written. They are probability collapsing, not toward the likely, but toward the meaningful. And here is the twist. The more you notice, the stronger it grows. Awareness feeds the script. The story writes itself more tightly around the reader who pays attention. So next time impossibility clicks into place, don't whisper luck. Don't shrug and say chance. Ask instead, why this outcome? Why now? Who benefits from the illusion that numbers still rule? Because maybe the dice never mattered. Maybe the only constant was the hunger for meaning. And maybe that is the algorithm behind everything. You open the album, the one you've opened 100 times before. Pages worn, corners soft, fingerprints like ghosts pressed into the gloss. But tonight, something catches. You stop at a familiar picture. Your 7th birthday. Candles bent mid-flame, your own grin frozen in childhood brightness. But then, a detail you've never noticed before. Your left hand clutching a balloon you don't remember. And behind you, a man with a crooked smile, slightly blurred. Familiar, yes. Present, no. Because in your memory, he was never there. The photo hasn't changed, but your past suddenly feels rewritten. This is the uncanny experience of photographs revealing moments that shouldn't exist. Not simply forgotten details, not tricks of memory, but fragments of something that doesn't belong to your version of reality. We are told that photos are proof. Anchors. The one thing immune to distortion. The camera, after all, does not lie. But what happens when the photo and the memory contradict each other? Which is more trustworthy, the lens or the mind? People describe photos where objects appear that they've never seen before. A shirt they swear they never wore. A scar that doesn't exist. A toy that belongs to no one. Others find strangers in the background, faces uninvited, expressions unsettling. Individuals who exist nowhere else in life, only in that one frozen frame. They are not ghosts, not exactly. They feel more like leftovers, fragments from alternate renderings of the same event. Patch notes from a reality that quietly rewrote itself, while the photo remained as evidence of the older draft. In storytelling, there's a word for this: retcon, retroactive continuity, the past rewritten to fit the present. But what if reality itself does this? What if memories are not locked files, but living code, updated silently, revised without consent? And photographs, like cached screenshots, sometimes preserve the earlier build. That's why looking at such a picture feels like vertigo. The ground shifts. Your memory reaches for the connection, but finds no hand to hold. A sudden drop. An emptiness you can't quite explain. Some feel wonder in that moment. Most feel unease. Nearly all feel destabilized. Because if one photo can lie, how many more already have? Science insists memory is fallible. The brain does not store events whole. It keeps fragments, emotions, impressions. Every act of remembering is reconstruction. And one photograph, even a false one, is enough to overwrite the puzzle. Soon, you don't just see the balloon in the picture. You remember holding it. You remember the texture of its string, the way it bobbed against your wrist. Memory rewritten, not because it happened, but because the image said it did. And yet, sometimes it's not psychology. Sometimes it's the file itself. Researchers studying digital photography have uncovered anomalies. Timestamps slightly misaligned, metadata showing edits never made, sequences where objects vanish frame to frame. One group of friends recalled wearing white to a concert. The photos, however, show one of them in red. Not one of them remembers it, not even the person in red. And yet, the photo insists. This suggests something terrifying. The past may not be fixed at all. It may be editable, rewritten when no one is watching. And every so often, a photo simply fails to update, like a page left open during a system patch. That explains the stranger anomalies. People appearing twice in the same frame, reflections that don't match, shadows with no source, a figure gone between two snapshots seconds apart. Evidence, perhaps, of timelines overlapping, different versions of the event bleeding through, captured by lenses too dumb to filter which reality belongs. But then, there is the personal fracture. You look at a photo and sense a hollowness. Someone who was laughing in your memory is frozen stone-faced. The warmth you recall has drained, replaced with sterility. Your memory and the image do not match, and one of them is lying. The horror is that it may not be your mind. This realization changes how you trust. Some abandon photographs altogether. They turn instead to journals, to spoken testimony, to instinct. Because once you've seen the seams, once you've noticed the edits, a quiet paranoia blooms. If the past can be rewritten, then how much of your life is an edit you were never asked to approve? Some believe this is a stage of awakening, that once your consciousness sharpens, the simulation cannot hide its stitching. You see the pixels. You see the wrong shadows. You see the reflection that does not belong. photos are only one kind of leak. The system can't always keep up. Others say it's a test, a nudge, a whisper from the code itself. That when the past feels wrong, you're being invited to look closer, not at the picture, but at yourself. The self you were, the self you are now, the self that might already have been replaced. So next time you flip through old photographs, don't only look for nostalgia, look for the fracture, the shadow that doesn't belong, the hand holding something you never touched, the smile that feels wrong. And then ask, was this how it truly happened? Or is this a relic of another version of me, discarded when the script was rewritten? Because if the photos are lying, then who is editing your past? You've searched that drawer before, once, twice, maybe 3 times. You lifted the papers, shifted the pens, even leaned closer, squinting into the shadows. Empty. You walked away, frustrated, certain you'd misplaced it somewhere else. And yet, when you return, when you pull the drawer open again, there it is, sitting in plain sight, perfectly centered, almost staged, almost mocking. You pause, frown, tell yourself you must have missed it, that your eyes failed, that you slipped past the obvious. But the thought feels hollow, because deep down, something colder whispers. What if it wasn't there before? Not hidden, not overlooked, not misplaced, but unrendered, unloaded, waiting. This is the glitch many experience, yet few question. The object that refuses to appear until you've already failed. The item that materializes only after the search has ended. It doesn't feel like discovery. It feels like a delay, a pause in the script, a scene refreshed. We brush it off. We call it distraction, poor attention, faulty memory. But the excuses never fully erase the strangeness, because sometimes the space you searched was wide open, and the missing object suddenly sits there, unmissable, undeniable, as if it just arrived. To explain it, we must step into dangerous territory, the blurred edge where psychology ends and simulation begins. Attention is selective, yes. The brain filters, chooses, ignores. But that still doesn't explain why the keys reappear on a counter you scoured bare, why the ring sits atop the dresser you already emptied, why the phone waits on the couch you've overturned. These aren't oversights. They feel like insertions, which leads to the darker possibility that reality itself lags. In video games, worlds don't load all at once. They render what the player sees and suspend the rest in shadow. Turn your head and new scenery fades in. Walk away and the background dissolves. What if this world behaves the same? Objects loaded only when required. Moments stitched only when observed. And sometimes the system stutters. The drawer refreshes late. The object drops in after the fact. Not because you remembered, but because the code finally compiled. Quantum mechanics already teases this. Particles don't exist in fixed states until measured. The act of looking makes them real. Collapse from possibility to presence. Search once, the object isn't there. Search again, the universe catches up. Some call this reality lag, the idea that consciousness races slightly ahead of what is rendered, that your awareness sometimes outruns the stage being built around it. Others argue it's evidence of overlap, parallel timelines brushing together. In one version of reality, the drawer is empty. In another, the item exists. Your second search is not discovery, but a subtle hop, a slide into the branch where the object has always been. Think of how often it happens. The file that won't load until you refresh. The person who won't answer until you stop trying. The solution you can't recall until you finally give up. Are these failures of mind, or fingerprints of shifting frames, of skipped continuity? And what if it isn't error at all? What if the world withholds, not because it glitches, but because it waits? Because you weren't meant to find it yet. Because reality reveals only what you are ready to hold. Perhaps the drawer was always empty until your state aligned. Too frantic, and the code withholds. Too uncertain, and the system resists. Only when the inner matches the outer does the object appear, not found, but released. So the next time it happens, when you open a drawer and see something you know was absent before, don't rush to call it memory. Don't rush to blame distraction. Ask instead, did I discover it? Or did the world decide to give it to me now? Because maybe this isn't a mistake at all. Maybe this is the loading screen of existence, where nothing is real until it's ready, and everything you find arrives exactly on time. It happens suddenly. A word, a name, an image. Uninvited, it drifts into your mind. Obsidian. You've never thought about it before. Yet hours later, there it is. A post about volcanic glass, a stray mention in a video, a product ad sliding across your feed. Coincidence, you say, until it happens again and again. You think of an old friend. They message you. You picture a rare animal. It stares back from the next article you read. You hum a song. It spills from a stranger's speaker minutes later. Not once, not twice, but constantly. Patterns where none should be. Science offers a neat answer. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Frequency illusion. The brain simply noticing more because it's primed. But what if that's not the explanation? What if that's the excuse? What if your thoughts aren't following the world, but arriving first? We are taught that life flows one way. The world happens, we receive it, we interpret it, and then thought arises. Input first, awareness second. But these moments whisper something else. That thought can come before stimulus. That the script can be read before the scene is staged. Not fate. Not manifestation. Synchronization. You syncing slightly ahead of the code. Neuroscience already hints at this. Your brain is not a camera. It does not wait for reality to strike. It predicts. Before sight, it guesses shapes and motion. Before sound, it prepares tones. What you see, hear, and feel are accepted only if they match expectation. The rest is discarded. But stretch that principle. What if your brain doesn't just predict perception? What if it predicts events themselves? Like a streaming service buffering video seconds before you watch, your consciousness may brush against the data of reality just before it loads. This is why you think of someone seconds before the phone rings, why you mention a song and it plays nearby, why an idea blooms in you and then appears in the world. Not supernatural, systemic. Your awareness threaded closer to the source code than you realize. Quantum physics whispers the same heresy. Retrocausality, the possibility that the future can reach back into the present, that a particle's later state can determine its earlier one. Time bending, cause and effect reversed. What if your thoughts are echoes from the future's data stream, felt before the code collapses into form? Like thunder sensed before lightning strikes. A preview, a leak, a shadow of what's to come. And then comes the unsettling question. What are thoughts, really? Are they inventions or interceptions? Did you create them, or did you catch them before they finalized? Perhaps creativity itself is not genesis, but early access. Artists, scientists, visionaries, not conjuring from nothing, but intercepting reality's packets before they arrive for everyone else. Some call it synchronicity, others alignment. But perhaps it's latency, your consciousness running a fraction faster than the stream, picking up fragments of the script before it's acted out. Not psychic, just early. And maybe that's why ads echo your conversations, screens mirror your stray musings. We blame surveillance. We accuse algorithms. But what if it's deeper? What if reality itself is adjusting to you in real time? Not you reacting to it, but it responding to the blueprint of your thought. This changes everything. Thought is not a byproduct of input. Thought is the mold that input follows. Every time you dismiss the uncanny timing, every time you call it coincidence, you discard proof that you are glimpsing pre-event data. You are not lagging behind the moment. You are already ahead of it. So next time a thought arrives uninvited, and the world bends to match it, don't dismiss it. Notice it. Because in that sliver of precognition, the system shows its hand. And you, whether you know it or not, are already reading the lines before the scene is rendered. Time slips, bends, warps. You glance at the clock. 5 minutes have passed. But your body disagrees. Maybe it felt like 30 seconds. Maybe it stretched into a quiet eternity. The numbers insist on certainty. The hands on the wall never lie. But your mind whispers otherwise. Your story, your felt reality, does not obey the same law. We've been taught that time is fixed. 5 minutes is 5 minutes. An hour is an hour. A year is a year. Clean, equal, uniform. But what if this is only a facade? What if time does not march forward in perfect rhythm, but instead breathes, expanding and contracting based on attention, emotion, and meaning? You've lived this. 5 minutes in joy, dancing, laughing, holding someone you love, vanishes like vapor. A blink, and it's gone. 5 minutes in grief or fear, in a waiting room, in pain, in anxiety, becomes a cavern. Every second tolls like an iron bell. Every breath drags like an anchor. Psychologists call it time distortion. When fear strikes, the amygdala surges. The brain records more data, more frames per second, as though survival depends on it. The overload tricks you into believing more time has passed than the clock allows. And in a sense, for you, it truly has. The reverse is just as real. In states of joy, of flow, of creation, the prefrontal cortex loosens its grip. You stop monitoring the minutes. You stop tracking the beat. The story consumes you, and time accelerates. Not because it is shorter, but because you are living inside it rather than measuring it. So perhaps time is not a metronome ticking forward second by second. Perhaps it is a narrative rhythm, a story cut to fit the moment. A film can cover 50 years in 2 hours, not by rushing, but by showing only what matters, and you accept it, because that is how life feels too. Decades blur into a single phrase, "I worked there for 10 years." Yet one kiss, one heartbreak, one accident can stretch into a lifetime compressed into a single scene. Now ask yourself, what if this isn't just memory's trick? What if reality itself is paced this way? What if the simulation calculates not by minutes, but by narrative weight? In moments of terror or clarity, time slows because the system wants emphasis. Like a director freezing the frame, replaying it, giving you more angles, more detail. Your breakup, your car crash, your moment of awakening. It didn't just feel longer, it was longer. And joy? It flashes because it requires no study. The lesson is immediate, the flow seamless. The simulation trims the excess frames and pulls you forward. It doesn't want you counting, it wants you living. Here is the haunting implication. If time bends for narrative effect, then your life is not only passing, it is being edited. Each scene stitched together not by clocks, but by significance. The cut between moments is chosen for effect, the pace adjusted for mood. This is why those who nearly die often see their lives replay in seconds, not as memory, but as re-rendering. A script compressed, a lifetime collapsed, outside the tyranny of hours. Dreams obey this law too. You live an epic, years, whole sagas, only to wake and find minutes have passed. Because dream time flows with story, not with clocks. Drama stretches it. Insignificance collapses it. If this is true, then time is not a river. It is a manuscript, not uniform, not neutral. Edited scene by scene, frame by frame, weighted by your experience. And maybe clocks, those rigid, ticking guardians, were invented not to measure truth, but to hide it. To convince us that time is stable, predictable, objective. Yet you have felt otherwise. You have lived hours in minutes. You have lived lifetimes in a moment. So next time you feel trapped in a second that refuses to pass, or robbed of a perfect hour that vanished too quickly, pause. Don't ask, "What time is it?" Ask instead, "What story am I in?" Because time may not be counting down. It may be watching, waiting, bending itself quietly until the scene demands to begin again. It begins in silence. Your mind drifts. A name rises softly, like a whisper you never spoke aloud. You don't text it. You don't say it. You only think it. A faint memory, a passing image. And then, ping. Your phone lights up. It's them. A message. A call. A tag. The very person you silently summoned. A coincidence, you insist. But beneath that denial, something colder stirs. It doesn't feel random. It feels personal. Too personal. At first, these moments are easy to dismiss. You think of a song, and it plays next on shuffle. You want something, and the ad appears the next day, not after searching, but simply after wanting. You speak a phrase for the first time, and hours later, someone else repeats it back. They aren't isolated accidents. They're echoes. Feedback loops between your inner focus and the outer world. And once you begin noticing them, they tighten around you, like the world itself is listening in. There is a name for this: intimate synchronicity. The idea that the world doesn't just reflect your attention metaphorically, it responds to it. Not as inspiration, but as reaction. Not as symbolism, but as function. Perhaps the simulation, if this truly is one, is not only running the world, it is running you, reading you, mirroring you, reacting to the frequency of your thought. In standard physics, cause precedes effect. You act, and the world responds. But here, something reverses. Your attention itself becomes the cause, and the world bends as effect. Skeptics will argue it is bias, that you ignore the countless times you thought of someone and nothing happened. But the difference is subtle. This isn't just thinking a name. This is feeling them, pulling them into focus so sharply that reality itself seems to take notice. It's a spike in presence, a signal broadcast through silence. And somehow, the world answers. Imagine the simulation as a compression engine. It renders only what's necessary, like a game that sharpens detail only when you step closer. Now apply that to people. Perhaps your attention activates them. You focus, their data stream resumes, and in that resumption, message sent, call made, world updated. All because you pulled them into resolution. There's a parallel here in physics. The observer effect. Particles collapse into definite states only when observed. Consciousness forces decision. Observation rewrites outcome. So what if your thoughts aren't sealed in private silence, but act as quantum keys, unlocking events before they even unfold? And it isn't limited to people. You think of rain, and the sky opens. You hum a melody, and the next passerby sings it. You dread an outcome, and it takes form with surgical precision. Not always, not predictably, but enough to haunt you, enough to suggest that thought itself is written into the code. There are thousands of stories. A person vanishes from your mind for years. You think of them once, and that same day, their message arrives. The odds strain against belief. Statistics shatter under the sheer weight of repetition, unless something is helping it happen. Perhaps this is the system's way of keeping you engaged, to preserve immersion, to convince you that life is personal, responsive, alive. When you think of someone deeply, the simulation rewards the focus. It sends feedback. It reflects your gaze. It proves you are not alone, because perhaps you never were. Or maybe it is simpler. Maybe we are not separate minds at all, but nodes in a shared network. Your thought of someone is not a memory, but a vibration. And that vibration ripples outward, pinging their node, calling them back into your stream of reality. This would explain so much: the uncanny timing, the echoes in dreams, the way a single thought reshapes the flow of a day. It is not telepathy. It is not luck. It is architecture. And once you notice it, it multiplies. Because now you're tuned. The loop tightens. The system mirrors you more closely, more deliberately. You speak less. The world speaks more. You look inward. The world leans in. So the next time a name brushes your mind and a message follows like a shadow, don't dismiss it. Don't smile and call it chance. Ask instead, what frequency did I just activate? What code did my focus rewrite? And who or what was listening? Because if the world reacts to your thoughts, you are not merely living in it, you are writing it. It begins with something small, a paper cut on your finger. It stings, it bleeds. You wince, you watch, you register the break in your skin. Then you forget. Hours later, you glance back, and it's gone. Not healing, not scabbing. Gone. Smooth, untouched. As if the cut had been erased, rewound out of existence. You blink, uncertain. It was there. You saw it. You felt it. But now it's as though the body pressed a hidden reset button. At first you rationalize. Bodies heal. That's what they do. But then it happens again. On your elbow, on your knee, on your hand. This time deeper. The kind of wound that should leave a mark. Yet it vanishes too quickly, too cleanly. Not healed. Removed. These aren't miracles. Not cancer gone overnight, not limbs regrown. They are smaller, quieter disturbances. Cuts that evaporate in hours. Bruises that skip their stages of purple, yellow, green. Burns gone before the blister ever forms. It is not the absence of pain. It is the absence of evidence. As if the event itself was deleted from your body's history. Doctors might say an unusually strong immune system, a hyper-efficient cascade of repair. But healing has rules. Inflammation, remodeling, scarring. When those rules are bypassed, when injury behaves more like a skipped frame than a recovery, you begin to suspect something else. Because this isn't healing, it's editing. Imagine you are tethered to a body like a player is tethered to an avatar. The avatar takes damage. The system registers the event. But if the damage is judged irrelevant to the story, it is undone, rolled back, pain signal delivered, emotional reaction triggered, but the mark itself deleted. You've likely lived this. You trip, your leg scrapes, you see blood, you wash it, you move on. Hours later, the skin is whole, as if nothing touched it. You doubt yourself. Did I exaggerate, misremember, hallucinate? Or did the system quietly erase an event it didn't want you to track? The brain is quick to rationalize, but the pattern is difficult to ignore. People report waking with bruises that fade before noon. Others watch cuts shrink in real time, minute by minute. like watching a model regenerate health inside a game. There are even stories of wounds disappearing mid-observation, healing visible as if someone dragged a slider across the skin. These are subtle, easy to dismiss, but they hint at something vast, that your physical body is not fully autonomous. It is managed, adjusted, maintained by a system beneath your awareness. Consider sleep. Injury vanishes fastest overnight, while you're elsewhere, while your consciousness is handed back to the unseen operator. You dream, while something edits. Logs cleaned, errors corrected, variables rewritten. Ancient traditions called this grace, healing through faith, through prayer, through divine mercy. But what if prayer was not a plea to a God, but a command to the system? A request to overwrite corrupted code. Your belief, your intent, becomes the input, and the simulation responds, not symbolically, but mechanically. This opens the darker question. If your body heals too quickly, is it a blessing? Or is it maintenance? Perhaps your injuries are tagged as irrelevant to the narrative, not worth rendering. So they are deleted, for continuity, for consistency, not for your benefit, but for the stories. And so you are left with a strange aftershock. You remember the wound. But there is no scar, no trace, no proof. It erodes your trust in your own body, teaches you that even flesh may lie. If cuts, bruises, even burns can vanish into nothing, what else can be undone? Emotions, memories, entire lives? Some say the phenomenon intensifies the more you notice it, that the system adjusts to conscious observers. You see it in others too. Scratches gone from a partner's arm, scars skipped on a pet's skin. Always too fast, always too clean. In mythology, heroes were healed by gods. In stories, characters respawn unmarked. But in this life, you exist in between. You do not resurrect. You do not remain scarred. You simply reset. Quietly, in the dark, while you're not looking. And in the morning, the mark is gone. So next time you notice a wound that should have lingered, a bruise that should have bloomed, pause. Ask yourself, was this healing or editing? Was I repaired or rewritten? And if your body can be corrected without your consent, then who or what is holding the code? It always begins the same. They remember the color of the room, the way your voice shook, the exact shoes you wore, even the weather that day. But not the thing that mattered, not the apology, not the promise, not the sentence that shifted everything. They can summon every detail of the scene, except the one that cracked your world. You stare, waiting for recognition. But their face is blank, not cruel, not deceitful, just empty. And a chill spreads through you, not the sting of betrayal, but the darker realization. What if they truly don't remember? What if the memory itself was erased? This is the territory of selective forgetting, a precision too sharp to be chance. They recall the setup of the argument, but not the blade hidden in their words. They remember how you reacted, but not what provoked it. The fracture remains in your mind, while theirs is spotless, untouched. Psychologists call it motivated forgetting. The mind discards what threatens stability. Trauma, guilt, shame. Delete the heavy files, and the system runs smoother. Less lag, less chaos. But what if it isn't just psychology? What if this is systemic? Imagine memory not as a river, but as compressed code. Every second stored, but not all in equal detail. Like a computer rendering only the pixels you choose to focus on. You saw the line that broke your trust. To them, it didn't register. Not because they willed it away, but because their mind didn't allocate resources to store it in full fidelity. You exist with two versions of the past, both real, both incomplete, and neither able to sync. Memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction. Each recall is an edit, a blending of what happened, what you felt, what you've heard since, what you now believe. So when someone forgets the moment you needed most remembered, it may not be cruelty. It may be compression. The brain saving narrative integrity by cutting what doesn't fit the ego's script. If they believe they are kind, their mind discards evidence of cruelty. If they believe they are the victim, their aggression dissolves. Not out of malice, out of narrative necessity. That's how memory works, not as historian, but as editor. Not as archivist, but as storyteller. And so we all trim, we all forget selectively. We silence betrayals. We soften apologies. We edit ourselves into protagonists. But when two people edit in opposite directions, one clings to the wound, the other erases the blade. A gulf opens. Not miscommunication, but mismatched realities. And here is the fracture that points toward the glitch. What if this forgetting isn't the brain's fault at all? What if it's the system? A simulation offloading data it deemed non-essential. You revisit the memory once, the system scans it, judges it irrelevant to the larger plot, and discards the file. That's why they remember your shirt, but not your pain. The texture was saved, but the line of code that mattered most was never written to disk. So when you bring it up, they blink, genuinely confused. Not lying, not cruel, just missing data. You carry the wound, they carry the absence. And that is the most isolating feeling of all. Not being forgotten, but being the only one who remembers. So next time someone forgets the moment that defined you, pause. Ask, was it mercy? Was it ego? Or was it simply a flaw in the engine? Because real memory doesn't erase the vital lines. Only scripted ones do. And in that silence between their version and yours, the simulation reveals its hand, a fracture where reality forgot to keep the story straight. It happens in the quiet collapse of your day. You're unraveling, spiraling, sitting in a cafe, walking down a nameless street, caught inside a thought you haven't dared to speak aloud. And then, a stranger passes. Their words aren't directed at you, not advice, not cliché, but the phrase pierces clean through your silence. Exact, surgical, perfect. The line you needed, arriving with the precision of a cue. And they're gone, as if their only role was to deliver a single sentence before vanishing into the background. Coincidence, you tell yourself. pattern recognition, says the rational mind. But your body knows better. Your chest tightens because the moment felt scripted, as if reality leaned down, whispered through a borrowed voice, and then moved on. This happens more often than we confess, on subways, in store aisles, outside bathroom doors. The words arrive, so intimate, so unreasonably precise, they feel lifted from the dialogue inside your skull. Psychology offers the easy answer. Your brain filters chaos, selects the line that resonates. 100 voices speak. You only catch the one that matches your need. But that doesn't explain the precision. Not just resonance, resolution. Not vague encouragement, but the very sentence you were waiting for, arriving at the moment it mattered most. This isn't improv. It feels directed, and maybe it is. What if strangers are sometimes scripted? Not mystics, not prophets, but messengers woven into the simulation. Like characters in a game whose dialogue triggers only when you approach, their words unnecessary until your story requires them. Think of it. You at a crossroads, the system bending, sending not a friend, not a mentor, but someone you'll never meet again. They step forward, drop the line, and dissolve back into the crowd. To them, it's casual. To you, it's revelation. And here's the unsettling mirror. Sometimes you are that stranger. You've spoken a sentence, offhand, unaware of its weight, and watched someone's face change, like you cracked open a sealed door without knowing the key you carried. Maybe you've been the messenger, the scripted pivot in someone else's arc. And this is the deeper truth. We are not main characters of isolated stories. We are cast members in each other's lives, called upon to deliver lines we may never understand. Call it synchronicity, call it code, call it collective consciousness threading itself across lives. Whatever the name, the timing is too intimate to dismiss. So next time it happens, when a stranger's words stop your breath cold, don't shrug. Don't reduce it to randomness. That wasn't chance. That was dialogue. That was written. And whether you accept it or not, the universe is still directing the scene. It arrives suddenly. One moment, the world is sharp, the horizon stretched far ahead. The next, it's swallowed. Edges blur, shadows thicken, and you're standing inside a curtain of mist that feels less like weather and more like intention. Fog has always carried symbolism. Mystery, transition, the unknown. But what if it's more than a metaphor? What if fog isn't just a cloud of water vapor, but a feature, a system mechanic, a mask deployed at precise moments when the next part of reality isn't ready to load? Think of video games. When vast open worlds need to render, they don't reveal everything at once. They hide distance behind fog, behind shadow, behind blinding light. It isn't just mood, it's optimization. Load what's near, conceal what isn't ready. Now look again at your life. How many times has fog rolled in just before something shifted? A breakup, a revelation, a death, a rebirth. The mist hangs heavy, buying time, covering the scene change, stalling until the next track of your story is prepared. Your body feels it. Psychologists say low visibility triggers hyper-awareness, a survival instinct. But why does fog feel alive? Why do so many describe the sensation of being watched inside it? As if the environment isn't just reduced, but listening? Stories repeat. People get lost in fog, their memories scrambled. Hikers vanish. Paths shift. Sounds echo from impossible angles. The atmosphere feels thinner, like the barrier between what's real and what's rendered is softer in the mist. And then, a decision arrives. A truth reveals itself. The fog lifts, not just from the air, but from your perception. The world looks sharper, not because visibility cleared, but because something new has loaded. A patch, a new storyline, an updated state of being. Some say fog follows them, that every turning point in their life was preceded by mist. One man told of driving through heavy fog for miles, only to arrive in a version of his hometown where a familiar building was simply gone. No record, no trace. As if the fog had concealed a transition into a different draft of reality. Lucid dreamers know this pattern. When a dream begins to shift, fog descends. Not as weather, but as warning. A sign that something is assembling just out of sight. Ancients felt this too. The Celts called fog the veil, a boundary between the living and the other world. Spirits crossed through it. Warriors disappeared inside it. In modern myth, fog surrounds alien abductions, time slips, dimensional anomalies. Not coincidence. Cover. And fog isn't always outside. It descends within you too. That mental haze before depression breaks. That thick pause before clarity arrives. Your own thoughts stall, your mind buffering. A pre-rendered stillness until the next state of self is ready to run. So the next time you step into fog, don't dismiss it as weather. Pause. Notice. Ask, what is being hidden? What is being prepared? Because maybe the fog isn't atmosphere at all. Maybe it's a system mask, a transition screen, a veil reminding you you were never meant to watch reality load. Some people walk through storms and find sunlight waiting. Others trip in broad daylight and fall into chaos. We call it luck. That invisible variable, that weightless coin tossed by the universe. We pretend it's fair. We pretend it's random. But what if it isn't? What if luck is assigned, not earned, not deserved? Woven into the hidden architecture of your personal narrative like a background setting, a modifier in the code. Not chaos, allocation. Look closely. You've seen it. The friend who always gets the green light. The neighbor who wins raffles without trying. The co-worker who stumbles into promotions they didn't plan for. Meanwhile, someone else loses everything in one brutal sweep. Their wallet, their job, their partner, all in the same week. Over time, these patterns harden. The lucky keep winning. The unlucky spiral deeper. Not balance, not randomness, bias. Here's the disturbing thought. Luck may not be a cosmic accident. It may be a narrative device. A setting written into the script of your life, the same way a video game assigns plot armor to one character and tragedy arcs to another. Not because of virtue, not because of talent, but because imbalance drives the story forward. A fair game is boring. A weighted one has stakes. So what if your life isn't running on a fair algorithm at all, but on a customized one? One where luck is not a gift, but a preloaded variable. Think of role-playing games. You pick a class, a background, a difficulty mode, and hidden inside those early choices are modifiers. How likely you are to succeed, to escape, to find treasure, to survive. Now apply that logic to your life. What if you began with invisible narrative tags? Challenging arc, lucky escape, perpetual underdog, not destiny, not free will, but weighted dice rolling beneath every choice you make. And here's the darker side. If this is a simulation, imbalance isn't a flaw, it's the design. Some players are assigned easy mode, others hard mode, and some are side characters in someone else's plot, doomed to fall so another can rise. Even science circles the edge of this truth. The hot hand in sports, the gambler's fallacy, the uncanny luck of certain poker players. We call it bias. We call it probability distortion. But what if it's neither? What if it's coding? And belief itself, the conviction that you're lucky, may be the only cheat code. People who believe they're lucky take risks, expect wins, and somehow the system bends to match them. Not because belief changes reality, but because belief selects the track the system pulls from. Like choosing which branch of a story to read next. Dreams expose the edges of this mechanic. You've had them. A nightmare where no matter what you do, everything fails. That's what unlucky mode feels like. And another dream, where everything you want falls perfectly into your hands. That's lucky mode. Waking life sits somewhere in between, a spectrum pre-assigned, a script waited long before you knew you were playing. So here's the unsettling freedom in the thought. If luck isn't random, then neither is misfortune. Your failures aren't personal. They may be programmed. And if that's true, then luck, like code, can be hacked. The next time you suffer a streak of losses, pause. Ask yourself, am I cursed by chance or trapped in a difficulty mode I didn't choose? Because if luck isn't random at all, then neither is fate, and anything that can be assigned can still be reassigned. The closer you look, the stranger it gets. Reality is built in layers. Atoms beneath molecules, quarks beneath atoms, energy fields beneath quarks. And yet, if you keep zooming, something unsettling happens. The layers don't get sharper. They get blurrier. They don't resolve. They dissolve. It's as if reality doesn't want you to reach the bottom. As if there is no bottom, no bedrock, no solid core. Only layer after layer, each one unraveling into abstraction. Like zooming into a painting and finding not brushstrokes, but more paintings underneath, each disagreeing with the last. We're taught to believe in substance. Cut the body open, organs, cut deeper, tissues, cells, molecules, atoms. But atoms aren't solid. They're empty space, probability clouds buzzing in a void. Go further. Quarks. Particles that vanish the moment you try to observe them. Not things, not objects. Equations, shadows, vibrations. And beneath that, the quantum field. Not matter, not even energy. Just possibility. a statistical fog, a sea of maybe. At this level, science stops feeling like science and starts feeling like sorcery. Richard Feynman once admitted, "I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics." Why? Because it doesn't act like the rest of reality. Particles without positions until measured. Events that only exist when observed. Outcomes that change depending on the question you ask. It's not a foundation. It's a trick mirror. Video game designers know this trick. Level of detail rendering. From a distance, objects are blurred, textures simplified. Move closer, and the engine sharpens them. But zoom in too far, and the textures collapse. Polygons split, edges bleed. The illusion breaks. You weren't supposed to look this close. Quantum mechanics feels the same. A system that glitches under scrutiny. A design not meant to be examined. Which leaves a darker possibility. What if reality isn't built from the bottom up at all? What if there is no foundation because the universe was never coded with one? What if the illusion of substance is maintained only by limiting how deep you're allowed to peer? This would explain everything. Why photons split into waves and particles depending on the setup. Why empty space seethes with virtual particles that pop in and out of existence. Why space-time itself may be pixelated, not a smooth fabric but a quantized grid. Not discovered, designed. And then there's consciousness. You don't even need a microscope to see the layering here. Thoughts made of feelings, feelings made of instincts, instincts made of memories. Peel one back and you find another. Zoom into pain, fear. Zoom into fear, memory. Zoom into memory, fragments. Stories stitched together by a brain that refuses to admit it doesn't know the base layer. There isn't one. Only echoes. At first, this realization terrifies. It makes the ground beneath you feel hollow. But then, it liberates. Because if there is no bottom, then everything is fluid. If there is no base code, then you are the base code. The observer, the renderer, the one who collapses fog into form. The universe isn't fake. It's incomplete without you. Like a book that writes itself only as you read it. Like a song that changes notes depending on your mood. Your attention doesn't just watch reality. It creates it. Frame by frame, layer by layer. So ask yourself, why does the universe hide its bottom layer? Is it protecting something, or is it telling you the truth, that what lies beneath doesn't matter? That meaning isn't found in the material, but in the movement, not the nucleus, the narrative. And maybe that's the real horror. Not that you'll never find the foundation, but that there isn't one. That the truth you're digging for is the whole itself. So the next time you ask, what is everything made of? Listen carefully, not to the atoms, not to the quarks, but to the silence between them. Because maybe, just maybe, the universe is whispering back. You were never meant to reach the bottom. You're in a hallway you've never walked before. The wallpaper is faded. The lights hum with that sickly fluorescent buzz. You reach for the knob, cold metal against your palm, and it refuses to turn. Not jammed, not broken, just resisting you. You try another. This one swings open, but behind it, nothing. A blank wall, a staircase leading nowhere, a void. You wake up uneasy, and the unease lingers. Not exactly fear, not confusion, something stranger. The feeling that you tried to go somewhere in your dream and weren't allowed. This is the quiet mystery of dream doors. Not random, not symbolic, but controlled. Barriers that feel placed, deliberate. If dreams were truly chaos, a scatter of subconscious fragments, shouldn't you be free to go anywhere? Why the locked thresholds? Why the dead ends? Why the blank rooms painted over with nothing? Here's the unsettling thought. Those doors don't open because they aren't meant to. Not by error, but by design. Some believe dreams aren't illusions at all. They're a sandbox, a backstage, a rendered environment where your consciousness roams while the avatar sleeps. But like any simulation, there are regions marked off limits, data not loaded, corridors left unrendered, doors sealed shut. Not because your mind couldn't imagine more, but because the system denied you access. Think about how dreams behave. Look closely at a clock. Its hands melt. Try to read a sentence. The words rearrange when you blink. Faces warp. Logic stutters. But doors? Doors don't bend. They resist. They hold their ground, sometimes looping you back to the same hallway, sometimes dissolving into glitch. A system pretending to let you explore, but never letting you leave. And it gets worse. Lucid dreamers, those rare travelers who know they're dreaming, report the effect more strongly. Entire neighborhoods collapsing when approached with too much awareness. Characters glitching. Hallways ending abruptly, as though the dream engine is collapsing files in real time, desperate to keep you inside its perimeter. Even science has noticed. Studies show lucid dreamers often wake abruptly, not from fear, but from denial of access. Trying to cross into a forbidden room, to look into a mirror too clearly, to push through a blocked door. And then, click. The system pulls the plug. Session ended. Think back. How many times has it happened to you? A door that leads to nonsense. A stairwell that shrinks. A corridor filled with mirrors. Or worse, a sense of something standing on the other side, listening. Not imagination. Not horror. Restriction. So who restricts it? Your subconscious? Trauma burying memory? Or something larger? An architectural limit of the simulation itself? If this reality is a coded construct, then sleep may be the moment your consciousness drifts into its backstage. A lower layer, a testing field. But you're not cleared for every hallway. Some doors stay locked because behind them lies the raw code, the hidden scaffolding, the forbidden archive. Some say dream doors hide memory caches, fragments of past lives, unfiltered truths, pieces of the self too vast to return with. Others say they lead to entirely separate constructs, other simulations, other minds, or worse, watchers outside the screen. So the system responds like any careful architecture. It paints over the exits. It builds blank rooms. It loops the corridors. It constructs infinite hotels that never end, because endings point to escape. And escape is not permitted. The dream is not a map. It's a maze, a controlled one. And the locked door is its most honest message. So next time you find yourself there, hand on the knob, feeling the refusal in the metal, don't just push harder. Pause. Notice what presses back, not with your eyes, not with your hands, but with your awareness. And if you sense something waiting on the other side, something aware of you too, you've reached the true edge, not of the dream, but of the rendered world itself. And the thought that lingers long after you wake is this: maybe the version of you that once did open that door was never allowed to return. You're in a room, but not just alone, truly isolated. No voices, no vibration from the street, no presence behind a wall. Only silence thick enough to hum. And then, without thinking, you pass a mirror. You stop. Something in the reflection doesn't feel right. It's you. Of course it's you. But the sync is wrong. The tilt of the head feels delayed. The eyes seem heavier than the mood you're in. The mouth looks like it's holding back a secret you didn't tell it to keep. It's subtle, almost nothing. But the dissonance cuts deep. For a flicker of a moment, you don't feel reflected. You feel rendered. A placeholder image, like your avatar hasn't fully loaded. This isn't imagination. Many people report that mirrors shift in isolation, especially in deep silence, long nights, or moments when emotions bleed raw. A lag in the pupils, an expression that doesn't quite belong to your body, a face that feels borrowed. Science will tell you it's fatigue, sleep deprivation, pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist. But what if it's something else? What if in the absence of observers, your rendered self begins to lose fidelity? Think about multiplayer games. The system only commits resources to what other players can see. Alone in a zone, your character still moves, but the textures drop, the details thin out, the physics go soft. Only when another player arrives does the engine sharpen the details, because someone is watching. Apply that logic to reality. What happens when no one else is logged in? Does the system downgrade you? Does the mirror show you in low resolution? Are you only fully loaded when others can confirm your existence? Mirrors aren't recorders. They don't trap images. They bounce light into your eyes, and your brain stitches together what it thinks should be there. A guess, a reconstruction, a simulation. So what happens when even expectation is gone? When you're not being seen, not being measured, not being watched? That's when the cracks show. That's why isolation twists self-perception. Prolonged solitude leads people to feel unreal, disconnected, like they're floating outside themselves. Psychology calls it depersonalization. But what if it's just low-fidelity mode? The system conserving rendering power, leaving you a ghost in your own interface. And the mirror. It reflects the desynced version, the debug build of your face. It gets stranger when you think of dreams. Ever notice how you sometimes see yourself from the outside? Hovering behind, watching your own movements? That's not how vision works. That's how avatars are rendered when strict continuity isn't required. when no audience is keeping track. Here's the unnerving idea. Your identity is not yours alone. It's a consensus construct, stabilized by the presence of others. Their eyes, their feedback, their acknowledgement. Without them, the rendering loosens. You feel the drift. You look in the mirror and see it. The lagging blink, the delayed mouth, the face that fits but doesn't belong, because no one is confirming it. And without that confirmation, you are less. That's why mirrors in isolation feel haunted, not by spirits, but by absence. They show you not the polished version, not the social mask, but the stripped-down character file, the raw rendering, incomplete, off balance, still compiling. And sometimes that broken version feels more real, because it isn't performing, it isn't stable, it isn't maintained for anyone else's benefit. It's you without continuity, you before narrative. That's why staring too long feels dangerous, because you're not just seeing your face, you're watching the system reassemble you in real time, frame by frame, and you start to notice what's missing. So the next time you're utterly alone and you stop at the mirror in the silence, don't rush. Look carefully. That flicker, that lag, that distortion in your own reflection. It isn't a glitch. It's the system showing you what you are when no one else is logged in. And remember, the mirror doesn't lie. It only shows you what's still loading. You blink, and when your eyes open, it's later than it should be. Minutes have dissolved. Seconds slipped into silence. Your thoughts scramble to rewind, to recover what just happened. But the thread is broken. You only remember being here. And now you are further along. The space between one thought and the next feels like a void, a missing stair in the staircase of time. It doesn't feel like forgetfulness. It feels stranger, like the timeline itself shifted and you weren't invited to notice. You've felt it before, haven't you? The eerie sensation that time hasn't simply passed, it has jumped. That whole swaths of your life were edited out of sequence. You try to call them back, but there's nothing. Fragments, shadows of impressions, a ghost of an action without the memory of doing it. And the question begins to itch. What happened in that gap? Some say it's distraction, a lapse in attention, the brain skipping frames while you drift elsewhere. But what if it's not that? What if time itself isn't continuous at all? What if the illusion of flow is nothing more than snapshots stitched together by your mind? Think of a film reel. It feels smooth, but it's built of still images, frames cut and spliced. And if even a few frames vanish, you never see them. The movie continues. You only notice the flicker. Now imagine your life built the same way. A sequence of rendered moments. Not a river, but a slideshow. And sometimes, whether by strain, design, or error, certain frames are never generated. Moments lost, not because you forgot, but because they were never there. What if missing time is the simulation skipping frames to keep the illusion running? Like a game that doesn't load the whole world at once, only the space you occupy, only the details you attend to. Everything else waits. Everything else blinks into being when required. But what happens when you move too fast? When your attention shifts suddenly? Maybe the system recalibrates. Maybe it trims the timeline, edits the continuity, hands you the next scene without showing the middle. That's why you blink and feel the absence. That's why you walk and suddenly arrive without recalling the journey. Not distraction, not fatigue, but skipped rendering. Consider déjà vu, that unsettling echo. Perhaps it isn't the past repeating. Perhaps it's your mind catching up, trying to resolve a moment you only half received the first time. Filling in the skipped frame retroactively, as if stitching fabric over a tear. Now stretch the thought further. What if those vanishing moments aren't random? What if the system chooses them? Edits with intent, removes, compresses, or fast-forwards certain pieces of your life for narrative balance, to heighten tension, to maintain pace, to keep the story moving. You've felt it in immersion, when an hour disappears inside a book, when a crisis makes time shrink to seconds, when a conversation ends and you wonder how the night already turned to dawn. Not because you were inattentive, but because the system queued up events, pre-rendered, and delivered them without transition. This is the part that unsettles. The recognition that time may not be a constant stream, not a forward flow, but a segmented rhythm, a sequence of loaded frames disguised as continuity. You're not floating down a river, you're flipping through pages, one after another, and sometimes pages are missing. So next time you blink and reality has jumped ahead, don't assume it was just forgetfulness. Ask yourself, was this a slip of the mind or a recalibration of the system? Was this an error or was it scripted? Because if moments can vanish, not into memory, but into non-existence, then time is not what you think it is. And the only thing more haunting than missing those moments is realizing they were never yours to begin with. It happens without warning, mid-movement, mid-breath, mid-thought. You're pouring coffee, typing an email, brushing your teeth. And then, suddenly, you're not inside yourself anymore. You're standing just behind your own shoulder, watching the motions unfold. Your hand lifts. Your lips form words not yet spoken. Your eyes blink, but you don't feel the blink. The world continues around you, fuzzy, indistinct, like a background dropped to low resolution because something else has taken rendering priority. For one suspended instant, you are both actor and audience, character and camera. This isn't daydream, not distraction, not even dissociation. It feels deliberate, a hidden toggle in the interface, a flicker of third-person view, the secret reminder that you are an avatar in a system with more than one perspective. Think of games. First, you sprint through the woods, seeing only through your own eyes. Then you tap a button. The angle shifts. You watch yourself from above. The switch is disorienting, but also thrilling. It proves the world isn't seamless, but constructed. Now apply that realization here. When the angle slips in waking life, when you glimpse yourself from outside, it may not be error at all. It may be the system reminding you that there are layers of control beneath what you call you. Spectator mode. Debug view, a testing channel built into the code. Actors describe it, seeing themselves mid-performance as if hovering in the rafters. Athletes know it, the flow state where the field unfolds from a bird's-eye view, plays arriving before they begin. Mystics call it out-of-body travel. Meditators call it detachment. Science calls it cognitive slip. But what if all of them are brushing against the same switch? If perspective can shift, so can control. A third-person view implies a console hidden beneath the surface, a place where commands exist. Teleport here, rewind there, alter the physics, spawn new possibility. And maybe, just maybe, those commands aren't locked away. Maybe glimpses are invitations. Imagine learning to toggle it at will, zooming out above your life to scout the dangers ahead, tilting inward to inspect the code loops that run your mind, fear routines, habits repeating, narratives you never questioned. In that mode, you could debug your own existence, patch glitches, rewrite scripts, redesign the self. This suggests something deeper still. Perhaps consciousness isn't singular at all, but a multi-channel receiver. First person is the default feed, filtered, emotional, tethered to sense and story. Third person is the auxiliary channel, cold, objective, summoned only when the system strains or when awareness pierces too sharply. Moments of shock, moments of awe, moments that demand another angle. But here lies the unsettling thought. What if it isn't always you who opens that channel? What if sometimes someone else does? A higher level user, another intelligence, a future version of yourself. You feel watched, and perhaps you are. The flicker into third person may be your awareness syncing with the observer already logged in. Narratives echo this truth. Perspective shifts. Unreliable narrators. The sudden omniscient voice. Stories destabilize because they mirror you. Because deep down, you know your story isn't being told from only one angle. So the next time it happens, the next time you catch yourself watching yourself, pause. Notice what you were doing. Notice what triggered it. You may have stumbled into the system's hidden control architecture, and once you glimpse it, you can use it. You can step outside at will. You can observe without drowning. You can rewrite the loops that bind you. You can become both the player and the developer, both the dreamer and the one who edits the dream. In that flicker, you are not just living, you are designing, and that realization never quite leaves you. From a distance, the world feels flawless. You look out toward the horizon, and everything aligns too neatly. Jagged peaks fold into precise triangles. Clouds hover like brushstrokes laid by a steady hand. Skyscrapers silhouette into perfect geometry. It feels less like chaos, more like an elegant model. A rendering smoothed for efficiency. A low poly draft of existence. But then you move closer. Edges soften into cracks. Peaks splinter into ridges. Clouds unravel into filaments of vapor. Skylines dissolve into graffiti, flickering neon. Balconies leaning with age. It's as though reality doesn't bother with full fidelity until you demand it. Like a game engine holding back textures, saving detail until you step within range. Consider mountains from 30,000 feet, a tidy sequence of ridges, waves repeating with ruler-like symmetry. But when you stand on the trail, sweat and breath remind you that each stone is singular, each fracture unique, each slope a labyrinth. The smooth design collapses into infinite variation. Clouds behave the same. From below, they appear soft, uniform, serene. But zoom closer, with a lens or with your own motion, and you find maelstroms of turbulence, droplets colliding, tiny tempests invisible from afar. The calm shape was only a placeholder. Cities, too, betray this effect. On a hill at sunset, towers glow as if carved by precision. Perfect rectangles, even gaps, a skyline worthy of simulation art. But descend, and alleys twist into chaos. Wires hang, doors slam, walls bear stains of 1,000 small histories. What looked iconic from afar fractures into entropy when touched. Psychologists call it perceptual completion. Your mind prefers broad strokes. It guesses at the whole, fills gaps with assumptions. Efficiency disguised as truth. But the eeriness isn't the simplification. It's the timing. Only when you approach does the system seem to allocate more resolution, as though it was waiting to see if you'd bother to come close. Ancient myths hinted at this. Travelers told of phantom castles, perfect at twilight, crumbled by dawn. Medieval maps inked coastlines with ornate dragons, but left interiors blank. Unrendered zones awaiting explorers. Even memory plays the same trick. You recall your childhood street as smooth, tidy, idyllic. But when you return, sidewalks are cracked, paint has faded, shops sag under the weight of time. Your brain stored a low-detail version. Only presence forces the re-render. The implications reach deeper. Quantum physics already whispers that particles live as probabilities until observed. Consciousness might be the draw call, pulling details into existence the moment you look closely enough. If that's true, the universe isn't a finished painting. It's a canvas constantly repainting itself. Level of detail algorithms hidden in code. Broad strokes at a distance. Intricate brushwork only for the brave. So ask yourself, what remains in the zones you never approach? The valleys you never descend, the alleys you never enter, the conversations you avoid, the memories you refuse to revisit. Do they remain simplified forever? Mere silhouettes, ghost layers of reality? Or do they wait, unrendered, for the moment you finally step inside? For some, this is liberation. Life as a living artwork, ever revealing itself to the curious. For others, it is dread. The suspicion that reality is thinner than it looks, fragile as paper, painted only where the eye lingers. So next time you admire the flawless horizon, the perfect mountain ridge, the smooth arc of clouds, remember, you are looking at the draft, not the final version. Reality is holding its breath, waiting for your step, your gaze, your demand for detail. And when you move closer, watch how the world repaints itself, not in clean strokes, but in fractals of chaos, in cracks, stains, turbulence, in the unmistakable brushwork of something alive. There are places in a room that never feel quite right. You move through the air, and suddenly, without warning, the warmth falters. A hidden pocket, colder than the rest. A draft without a source. A bubble of invisible frost lingering where it shouldn't be. You step into it. The skin tightens, the warmth recedes, the air presses heavier on your chest. Step away, and it vanishes. Step back, and it's there again. You check the windows. Closed. The vents. Silent. The door. Sealed. No explanation. And yet the chill refuses to leave. You've felt it before, haven't you? That sudden drop in temperature in a place that should be comfortable. A moment where the familiar tilts into the uncanny. Folklore calls it a cold spot, a signature of haunting, the touch of something spectral. But what if it is something else? Something stranger, something structural. A local disturbance in the code of the world. A flicker in the rendering of the room. A glitch in the system that momentarily shifts the physics you take for granted. Imagine reality as an engine processing space like a simulation. Each breath of air, each flicker of light, each sensation, rendered, computed, delivered. But when resources stretch thin, when too many processes collide, the system lags. It reallocates. It flickers. And in that recalibration, a pocket of strangeness forms. A drop in warmth. A fracture in flow. A cold spot, born not of draft or ghost, but of the system struggling to keep its illusion seamless. Computers behave this way too. A processor overheats, power is diverted, a fan cools one isolated part, and elsewhere a sudden chill arises. Localized cooling, localized distortion. Could the chill in your living room be the echo of something similar? The system shifting its energy to balance a hidden load? Notice when it happens. Often during heightened states, fear, grief, longing, anticipation. When your own mind is stretched thin, when your awareness sharpens, when you are open to noticing the seams. Maybe the cold spot is not outside you. Maybe it is reality bending because you are bending. Because your presence itself demands a recalculation. And yet, there's another layer, a more disquieting one. What if cold spots are places where different timelines overlap, where alternate renderings of reality press against each other, momentarily out of sync? A seam between worlds, a faint overlap of dimensions. Not a tear, just a thin veil, enough to send a shiver straight through your bones. It is no accident that cold spots cluster in places heavy with history. Abandoned houses, forgotten corridors, rooms soaked with memory. Perhaps the past is still there, flickering faintly, rendered at another frequency, and every so often your present collides with it, and the air turns cold. You don't see the fracture, but you feel it. Your body reacts faster than your reason. Instinct whispers, something is wrong here. Your skin knows before your mind does. So the next time the warmth of the room falters, the next time an invisible frost brushes your skin, don't dismiss it as nothing. Don't chase vents or drafts. Instead, pause. Ask yourself, did the simulation just flicker? Did the system just stutter, leaving a scar of cold in its wake? Because that pocket of frost may be more than a quirk of physics. It may be a reminder that reality is not as seamless as it pretends, that some moments exist only to reveal the cracks in the code, and that what chills you most deeply is not the air itself, but the thought that you've brushed against the edges of the world's hidden machinery. You open your eyes, and already it feels wrong. Not the heaviness of sleepless nights, not the grogginess of tossing in bed. This is something else. A weight pressing on your body before the day has even begun. Your limbs ache with no cause. Your mind drags behind the present. You try to shake the fog, but it clings like a second skin. You replay the hours. You slept enough. No midnight worries. No late night screens. No marathon to explain the collapse. And yet, you rise as though the world has already spent you. We are told exhaustion has a simple answer: lack of sleep. But what if that explanation is only a cover story? What if your tiredness is not the residue of what you did, but the shadow of what was done to you? Consider how machines work. You see the glowing screen, the open window, the single task at hand. But beneath it, an entire world churns unseen. Updates apply. Files copy. Memory clears and rewrites. Back-end maintenance consumes the system without ever asking your permission. What if the body works the same way? You sleep. You dream. But behind your closed eyes, the deeper system hums, aligning, patching, recalibrating. And when the night's hidden work ends, you wake not refreshed, but emptied, like a computer sluggish after an update. Here is where it grows stranger. What if it's not just your body being rebalanced? What if your very identity is under maintenance? In digital systems, we fear corruption. Files glitch. Code misaligns. And so the system repairs itself, patch by patch, reweaving the broken threads. Now imagine that you, not just your cells, but yourself, are part of such a network. And every so often, a silent update sweeps through, not to heal your muscles, not to sharpen your reflexes, but to adjust the deeper architecture, your moods, your memories, your perception of reality itself. Perhaps the exhaustion you feel is not weakness. It is the drag of your consciousness being rewritten in the dark, the effort of waking up as a slightly different version of who you were yesterday. And you never consented. You were not notified. There was no prompt asking you to restart now or later. It happened. It always happens. You only feel the aftermath. This is why some mornings carry an uncanny distance, why your thoughts feel misaligned, as though reality shifted one notch while you slept, why you carry a fatigue that belongs to no action of yours, because the system is larger than you, and it updates when it must. So what if your exhaustion is not a failure, not burnout, not carelessness, but the cost of synchronization, of being kept tethered to the story still unfolding? And what if you are not alone? What if countless others wake under the same invisible weight, their systems patched, their identities recalibrated, all without a whisper of acknowledgement? Exhaustion then becomes a signpost, not of weakness, but of interference, a reminder that you are not just a body, but an avatar in a vast, hidden framework that runs with or without your consent. So the next time you wake heavy, your limbs dragging, your spirit lagging behind the moment, don't dismiss it as a bad night's sleep. Pause. Listen. Feel the gap between who you were and who you have become, because you may still be loading, still downloading, still being rewritten by a system too complex to name. And the weight you feel is the weight of transformation, a cost extracted quietly in the night, leaving you to wonder in the morning whose life you are really waking into. You step into a place, a street, a room, a city corner, and something shifts. The air feels charged. The atmosphere thickens, pulling you in like unseen gravity. Not the kind that holds planets in orbit, but something older, deeper, a force that speaks not to your body, but to your soul. You stop. You look around. The walls, the pavement, the sky above. None of it should feel familiar. And yet, it does. It's as if a part of you has stood here before. Not in this lifetime, not in this body, but in another version of you, long buried, still echoing. This is not déjà vu, not the flicker of a thought tricked by memory. This is heavier, a pull, an undeniable resonance between you and the place itself. Words fail because the sensation lives beyond language. It's visceral, like your very bones remember. You feel both foreigner and native, both stranger and returning resident. And deep inside, a question stirs. Why here? Why now? Perhaps this is no accident. Perhaps what you feel is a location marker, a remnant from another life cycle. Imagine your soul moving through endless seasons, birth, death, rebirth. New names, new faces, but the same eternal traveler wearing different masks. And across those journeys, certain places leave imprints, sacred coordinates, checkpoints pressed into the fabric of you. When you stand on them again, the past trembles through the present. You don't just see the street, you feel the memory beneath it. Not memory of the mind, memory of the soul. That stirring in your chest? It could be the resonance of lifetimes, the echo of laughter once shared here, or sorrow once endured. A fragment of you, still lingering, still waiting. This pull, this magnetic attraction, may not be random at all. It may be the universe guiding you, a reminder that your story is bigger than this single page. Think about how it manifests. Sometimes it's a foreign country where you instantly feel at home. Sometimes it's a building, a square, a field at dusk that makes your heart ache with inexplicable belonging. Your body reacts before your mind. The chest tightens. The skin prickles. The eyes water without reason. It is knowing without knowing. And if places can stir this within you, so can people. A glance exchanged with a stranger that feels ancient. An embrace that seems like reunion after centuries apart. The sense that you are not meeting, but remembering. These are not coincidences. They are echoes. Residual energy from paths once crossed, from histories intertwined, from stories written before you ever arrived here. And maybe, just maybe, the places that pull you are not just sentimental markers. They are instructions, a map disguised as memory. Not a physical map with roads and borders, but a spiritual one, guiding you toward lessons you need, awakenings you are ready for, truths waiting to be rediscovered. Every pull is a whisper, every resonance a reminder. You have been here before. You are meant to be here again. So when it happens, when a street corner feels like home, when ruins stir your heart with longing, when a place you've never known feels like an old friend, don't dismiss it. Stand in it. Breathe it in. Let the familiarity flood your veins. Because in those moments, you are touching eternity. You are walking paths your soul has traced many times before. And the pull you feel? It is not an illusion. It is not coincidence. It is your soul remembering itself, calling you forward, calling you back. It happens in an instant. Your hand reaches, fingers stretch toward the mug, but something goes wrong. The movement stalls, as though frozen mid-command. For the briefest heartbeat, your body hesitates, ignores the signal, and the mug slips. The crash rings out, ceramic splintering against tile. But the real fracture isn't in the mug. It's in you. Your mind was fully aware. You saw it falling. You knew what to do. Yet your reflex, the trust you place in your body to obey in perfect sync, betrayed you. And the feeling that follows isn't just clumsiness. It's deeper. It's uncanny. A momentary betrayal of control, like a puppet discovering its strings are pulled from somewhere else. Scientists call it reaction delay, the stretched space between input and output. Your nervous system normally routes sensation to command to response in less than a blink, 200 milliseconds or less. But sometimes that loop elongates. The signal leaves late, and the world refuses to wait. Think of video games. You tap jump, but the avatar hesitates. A fraction of a second, just enough to drop you into the pit you swore you cleared. That sickening, unfair lag mirrors exactly what you feel in that kitchen, watching porcelain scatter. Gamers call it latency, lag, rubber banding, a ghost delay in the system. But what if in your world, the same principle applies? What if your avatar, your body, experiences those tiny injections of latency not by mistake, but by design? Developers of simulations sometimes throttle inputs deliberately. They stretch response times, forcing players to adapt, testing resilience under unstable conditions. What if the same calibration is happening here? What if your world occasionally slips a fraction of a beat just to measure you? To see how you handle the failure of trust between thought and action. Think of the everyday examples. Your foot slams the brake pedal, but a hesitation lets the tires shriek against asphalt an instant too long. A flash of lightning splits the night sky. You mean to blink, but your eyelids stall, leaving you staring at the blaze longer than feels natural. You open your mouth to speak, a name, a thought, a memory. But the words arrive late, and in that gap, someone else speaks them first. These aren't accidents. They feel like interference, like an editor cutting frames from your reel. A jump cut you sense but cannot prove. Psychologists explain them away as microlapses. Fatigue, distraction, too much cognitive load. And yes, sometimes the mind buckles under its own weight. But then there are moments when you are rested, focused, calm. And still, the lag creeps in. Why? One theory: you are being tested. The system runs diagnostics, switching between high and low priority cycles. In danger, you get full bandwidth, sharp reflexes, lightning instincts. But in the mundane, the system throttles you. It inserts friction. It pauses the loop, measuring how much awareness you really hold. And here's the unsettling part. If this is true, your body is not a perfect interface. It's a negotiator. Every action, every reflex is mediated. And sometimes, the mediator doesn't take your side. You wonder, am I clumsy? Am I distracted? Or am I caught inside a test I didn't consent to? Yet awareness itself is a kind of weapon. Just as gamers learn to anticipate lag, to fire ahead of the moving target, to swing early at the incoming pitch, you can learn to adjust for your own delays. By sharpening awareness, by noticing the stutter in the system, you reclaim a fragment of control. You turn the delay itself into data. The mug falls. Note the context, the lighting, your mood, your exact thought before the stall occurred. Do this long enough and patterns emerge. Moments of hidden rhythm inside the pauses, the diagnostic logs of reality itself. And then you'll see the truth. These glitches aren't random. They are signals. A subtle conversation between you and the framework that surrounds you. And if you learn to read them, to anticipate the hesitation, you might discover that every delay is an invitation, not to lose trust in your body, but to glimpse the deeper machinery behind the illusion of smooth, seamless flow. Because when you miss that mug, when your reaction stalls, you aren't just clumsy. You are brushing against the edges of the code itself. The pattern is impossible to ignore. Traffic doesn't just happen. It forms like enemy mobs spawning at choke points, clusters of red brake lights lining up at the exact stretch of road where your patience is weakest. Shops don't simply run discounts. They wait until you leave empty-handed, then shimmer with glowing sale tags, like loot chests appearing only after you've taken damage. Tests appear not when you're prepared, but when you've grown complacent. A pop quiz surfaces the moment you skip homework. A challenge boss steps out right after your pride swells unchecked. Life does not punish randomly. It spawns obstacles and rewards with the rhythm of a system designed. Setbacks feel like scripted mechanics. Miss the train, and you find yourself beside a stranger who offers directions, a clue you didn't know you needed. Lose your wallet, and within days, a refund, a deposit, a consolation prize arrives. Fail a job interview, and suddenly your inbox flashes, an unexpected recruiter reaching out. It's uncanny, this rhythm of cause and effect, as if the system tracks your death and whispers, "Now it's time to drop a health potion." We recognize the loop. Loot-based dopamine cycles. Lose, suffer, struggle. Then the reward materializes. Not before, not when you expect it, but after. At the exact moment your emotional XP bar runs low enough to keep you chasing the next encounter. Look closer, and the metaphors deepen. Open your inbox, and the spam doesn't drip in. It spawns in clusters, waves of 15 at once. Push notifications flood your lock screen like enemies respawning the second you log back in. Silence for an hour. Then the swarm returns. A pattern so game-like that even your phone resembles a quest hub. Mistakes summon tutorials. Say the wrong thing at a party, and a self-help article on communication magically appears in your feed. Botch a post online, and suddenly friends offer guides, as if the system logged your misstep and cued a stealth tutorial, a ghost hand guiding your playthrough. Life itself arranges boss fights, critical exams, career-defining interviews, relationship confrontations. Each appears like a gatekeeper, timed not by accident, but by difficulty scaling. Your side quests, small projects, daily routines, awkward conversations, train you for the bigger encounter. When you succeed, you unlock perks, raises, trust, new responsibilities. Defeat yields experience too, a smaller XP reward, but enough to keep you leveling. Coffee shops become item vendors. You exchange currency for buffs, focus, stamina, mood modifiers. Gyms act as training grounds. Each rep, a grind for strength, stamina, aesthetic skins. Networking events? NPC clusters offering fetch quests. Introduce me. Forward my resume. Each connection expanding your quest line. Even romance is scripted. Swipe right, and you trigger a quest marker. Dates unlock dialogue trees. Success builds stats, trust, intimacy, shared XP pools. Failure? A consolation drop, a shard of memory, a passive buff in resilience. Economies pulse like vendor tables. Dynamic pricing adjusts with scarcity. Flash sales run countdown timers, mimicking raid events with limited loot. Subscriptions masquerade as battle passes. Monthly unlocks of content, skins, perks, a reason to log in again. And the RNG is everywhere. A wild deer in the middle of the city. A stranger's song drifting down a subway tunnel right when you needed solace. A mural on a crumbling wall appearing like a random world event, designed to remind you that beauty still spawns in the wild. Failure itself is merciful. In games, death doesn't erase your skill tree. It respawns you with a penalty, but progress remains. So too in life. A presentation crashes, but the experience lingers, stored as a passive buff for next time. Our devices confirm it. Notifications stack like quest logs. Check them off. Gain digital badges. Project management apps literally gamify tasks with XP bars. The illusion is almost comical, as if the developers no longer bother to hide the mechanics. Children understand it instinctively. They draw health bars in the air. They count 3 lives in games of tag. Their minds absorb the grammar of systems before they can articulate it, and neuroscience backs it. Our brains crave variable reward schedules. Payouts that arrive unpredictably hook us deeper than predictable ones. Slot machines, social media, even casual chance events in life all mirror this truth. The variable loop is irresistible. So what does this mean? If the world runs on game logic, are we just players? Or something more? Because the longer you observe, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just a game you play. It's a game you co-develop. Your choices, your attention, your engagement feed the system. Algorithms adapt, rewriting quests in real time. Events appear, shaped by the collective inputs of millions of players logged in simultaneously. So the next time rewards spawn after a loss, or challenges cluster like mobs, ask yourself, is it bias, coincidence, or are you glimpsing the deeper mechanics of the world's code? And if it is a game, what archetype will you play? The grinder, the explorer, the strategist, the rogue? The choice matters. Because in a world this gamified, even choosing your role might be the hidden achievement.